This is St. Moritz. This is the Sailing Champions League. This is the final 2018. High-class sailors, short races, identical boats, thrills guaranteed. Who will be the best sail club in Europe? The answer, now.
The question of who will be the best sailing club in Europe, that's what we're here to answer today in St. Moritz. And we're just a few hours away from finding out because we're in day 4, the final and concluding day of the Sailing Champions League final. We've got racing already underway and we will be bringing that live racing to you shortly. We've got an interesting format that we will go into a little bit later on in the show as well. So let's find out a little bit more about this fantastic venue, St. Moritz.
1, 2, 3, listen.
In St. Moritz, it's time for the big show, for big sailing, for big racing. It's home of the Sailing Champions League Final 2018.
Well, St. Moritz is very famous as a sailing venue. The World Match Racing Tour was here for many years, and it's one of the best stadium sailing arenas we could have, very close to shore. It's a very nice environment, perfect weather, and we hope for strong winds. If the weather is good, we have a Maloya wind, which is pretty strong. So it's a nice place.
31 teams from 12 nations line up for one of the most competitive events of the year.
We're on almost 1,800 meters. You have to imagine most ski fields end up here, and we're actually starting. This is the bottom of the valley, and due to this fact, we have this extraordinary wind conditions.
Quick maneuvers, excellent tactics, and perfect boat handling are all vital for success on the Lake of St. Moritz.
Thanks for joining us on this final exciting day here in St. Moritz. My name's Andy Rice and we're going to be doing commentary this afternoon with Mark Corky Rhodes, the expert here to run through the SAP Sailing Analytics, which brings an extra level of analysis to why people are winning races and why they're losing races. So we've got a fleet of 8 identical J70s that 31 teams from 12 nations have been rotating through. So everyone gets to sail in pretty much each colour of boat. They're all colour identified, and everyone should get to sail everyone through the round-robin process. But the wind has been a little bit difficult, Corky. We've not had the best of it, but at least we've got some racing happening out there at the moment, and hopefully those J70s keep on rolling around the track.
Well, it's the nature of the sport, isn't it? You come to a venue and you have champagne conditions on one day and then no wind the next day, and that's been a bit of a tricky situation. That's happened the last couple of days. They got on the water yesterday. It was a bit stop-start, but the race management did an amazing job. They held them out there for as long as possible, got the racing. They're out racing now. There was no rain. The rain set in a little bit more, so hopefully that doesn't dampen down the wind, which we saw can happen. But at the moment, they're out racing, and that's what matters.
And also, a couple of days ago, we were both wearing jackets, weren't we? And then I took my jacket off yesterday because I'm a little bit tougher than you. But now it's warmed up a little bit more because even Corky's taken off his jacket. So things are hotting up in every sense.
It could be the temperatures are hotting up, or we're just hardening up. As we're here, we're toughening up a little bit more. So.
Yeah, maybe we're acclimating, as they say in the USA. So we're 1,856 metres above sea level, so the air is a little bit thinner here. It's quite an effort walking upstairs, certainly for someone of my age anyway. But the leaderboard, let's take a look at who holds the top of the leaderboard, and that's Regatta Club Oberhofen. who are now on 17 points. But Société Nautique de Genève, they've done one more race than Regatta Club Oberhofen. So Regatta Club Oberhofen would need to win the next race to stay on equal first place with the other Swiss team. The Italians, Circolo della Velabara, we saw them slip from 1st to 8th in their last race yesterday. What a disaster. Imagine how far ahead they'd be if they'd managed to hold on to that first place, but they didn't. So that puts them pretty much level pegging for first place now as well, setting up for a really exciting showdown this afternoon. Then 3 German teams following hot on the heels of those Swiss and Italians: Deutsche Touring Yacht Club, Norddeutscher Regattaverein and Wassersportverein Hemelingen. And then the Swiss, skippered by World Match Racing Tour star Bjorn Hansen, KSSS, the Royal Swedish Yacht Club in 7th place, and still with a chance of breaking into that all-important top 4. So first place for Pirogovo, the Russian team, has lifted them into 8th and gives them an outside chance of breaking into the top 4 today. And the same can be said for Club de Voile Saint-Aubin from France. St. Petersburg Yacht Club won their last race just now, just before we came on air. Is that going to be enough to lift that Russian team into the final 4 later on? I'm not sure about that, but it's a really, really tight leaderboard, Corky. We haven't got long left in the qualifying session, so time is running out for those that aren't already in the top 4. Let's have a look at highlights yesterday to get a sense of what conditions were like and how things played out yesterday.
Sailing in St. Moritz is pretty special, particularly when you're representing your country and club at the Sailing Champions League finals.
Well, to be part of the Sailing Champions League is great. I mean, for a Swiss team to sail here in Switzerland is even better.
So cool to be able to come to places like this, sailing in such amazing scenery.
Former Olympic sailor Henriette Koch from Denmark is skipper of the only all-female crew.
For us, sailing in the Sailing Champions League is a great honor. I think it's a lot of fun to compete against all the great teams across all Europe.
Day 3 of the finals brought rain and light winds, yet still the racing was close. Today we will find out who will be crowned the best sailing club in Europe.
So it was a really tough day, particularly for the race officer yesterday, getting those races in. It's a little bit better today. You can see the boats are moving nicely. Boat number 2 on the right-hand side. Our man out on the water asking the hard questions of the sailors is Tim Cruiser. So who's he got for us to speak to? It is our race officer. So Tim, what does Philip have to tell us?
Exactly. We've got Philip Rosenberg with us. I would say he's the man who's got the toughest job in town. What do you say, Philip?
Yeah, well, today is a little bit easier than yesterday. Yesterday was really tough, and also for the sailors, hard day. Very difficult to make good courses and good races. Now the wind went up a little bit. We have now 6-7 knots.
But the rain is coming in, which means the wind might drop again, right?
I don't think so, because actually the wind started up again when the rain was coming. So maybe this time it's different. There was quite a lot of wind shifts in the morning. Now there's still wind shifts, but not that heavy. And so hopefully we can just continue racing. And we are now just waiting for the change to finish.
Did you get any feedbacks from the sailors about today? Did they say or did they mention anything that sailing is all right today, better than yesterday? Or how do you perceive it?
Yes, I think that's okay today. Of course, today there was not that much feedback. Yesterday we got more feedback. Because there was, of course, some decisions that might be where you can discuss about. But today was good, and yeah, even the finish was also much closer than yesterday. Yesterday we had sometimes boats that were far behind. Today much more together, everything, and so there are also a lot of more situations at the marks, which also I think it makes it more interesting for the observers.
It looks like the sailing is a little more equal and fairer than yesterday. That's it, right?
Yeah, I think so. And but of course you can also gain or lose much more in a race. So that's also very tough.
Exactly. What we must say also, you've got a wonderful crew with you. So they always give us coffee or hot chocolate or something like that. And also, he doesn't have to say anything. They do everything like that, put the flags up whenever they need to. He doesn't have to worry about anything. So he doesn't really have the toughest job. I think you guys in your cozy studios got the toughest job in town.
Tim, it is indeed a cozy studio, but I'm pleased you acknowledge just how tough it is in here under the white lights. Tim, just another question for Philip. We're coming to
the end. Is it raining? Yes, it is.
Yeah, we can see that, and we always enjoy watching you in the rain. Tim, we're coming to the end of qualifying, and so to get through one of these flights takes quite some time because there's 4 races in each flight. So can you just clarify with Philip how qualifying is concluded if they only get halfway through a flight, or what he has in mind?
Okay, I will ask him. Philip, are you still with us? Hold on, he's got something else to do. What do we do if a flight is not finished? You know, if we have to finish in the middle of a flight, what do we do then?
Yeah, then that's a bit bad luck for the teams that then have no chance to sail again. But there's a rule that they get the average points of the other races they sailed before. Of course, then the more races you sailed before, the fairer the average is. But there's this rule that's good to have, because otherwise the teams that sailed the races would have been cancelled then. But of course, the teams that can't sail,
it's difficult for them, no question. No question. Tell us again about the timing. When is the last race? When's the last call? When's the first final?
We want to do the warning for the first final at 2 o'clock. So we have to finish the series like 1:30. The last chance for the clubs to sail.
So let's say at 1 there would be one.
Sorry.
Yeah, we have to. Okay, you know, guys, we're going to ask this later. I was thinking if at 1 they would have to start a new flight, then would they start it or not? I guess they wouldn't.
So now, sorry.
Doesn't matter. That's life. So if you finish a flight at, let's say, 1 or 12:30, would you start a new flight then, or would you just drop it?
Yeah, we'll have to discuss this with Oliver and Caroline, of course, because in Germany we have this rule that if we can't finish the flight, then we won't start it. But we don't have this rule here, and we're here for sailing, and we only made so less races, so I think it's better if we really do 1, 2, 3 more races, even if the flight's not finished then.
Okay, thank you very much, Philip. We're here for sailing, so let's sail.
Tim, thank you very much, and we wish the best of luck to Philip and his crew trying to get as many races out of this qualifying session as we can. And we are 2 minutes 20 to the final heat of Flight 7, and this is a particularly interesting one coming up because we have Regatta Club Oberhofen, who are currently leading overall, and Circolo della Velabari, who are just 1 point behind in joint second. So 2 of the leading lights are up against each other, and it's really important to try. Here we are with Circolo della Velabari on the right hand side. Simone Ferraresi is the helm, a 49er Olympic campaigner and also a fantastic match racer, and his Italian crew managed to win Porto semi-final to get to the finals here in St. Moritz quite convincingly back in June, and they have been the class act here, and they brought difficulties upon themselves with those 2 penalties. And here we have Regatta Club Oberhofen from Switzerland, skippered by Alan Stettler in the middle. That's Bruno Steltner on the foredeck. And there is Alan Stettler, very experienced sailor in a number of different dinghy classes, including the 470. And they have been extremely solid throughout this competition. They got a 7th in one race, but all their other scores have been in the top 3. Now, we're coming into the final 1 minute before the start, and so they will be lining up very shortly onto starboard tack and deciding which end of the line they want. Corky, any insights from you as to which end of the line you might choose?
I definitely want to be towards that committee boat end. There's definitely the breezes round towards that right-hand side, so you'll see many of them want to come out, hold their lane and hold their position. We have seen it start to track slightly left, and it enables them to take those better options. So it's all about a clean lane, coming out here with speed, but being able to hold that clear lane all the way through. You do not want to be closed gap. Now you can see them all bunching and trying to hold on towards that starboard end. Again, it's about when you're going to pull that trigger, when you're going to accelerate that boat forward. again, creeping forward quite early with 10 seconds to go. These boats are quite manoeuvrable and will steer right through into the end. Now the speed needs to be coming on right in through to finest end, so a nice clean start late in for the Finnish team into the middle of the pack there, but for the Italians off at the pin end here, good acceleration and speed. Look at the difference, they've got a clear lane. That breeze starting to move back towards that left hand side again, so favouring them, giving them a nice little bit of a header. And that's what we mean by just slowly moving that breeze around towards the left-hand side. So it's giving them that favouritism off this port end of the start line. So they'll be constantly looking over their back shoulder. You'll see the odd look back. Just there we go, just to see where they can get that tack in. So this manoeuvre as they come down, as the breeze heads, all of these boats are going to clear out and start to delve down. So they're just looking for when they can get that tack in and come back towards the centre of the course.
Very compromised start for Regatta Club Oberhofen on the right-hand side. It will be interesting to look back at the end of this race, see what went wrong for Oberhofen in the early stages. Now, Circolo della Vellabari are able to tack because the other boats have tacked, and the pink boat, Norddeutscher Regatta Verein, has managed to poke themselves quite well because they were in danger of falling into the bad air of the Italian boat. But now it seems like the Germans on the pink boat maybe have the upper hand. And as I say that, the Italians have found an extra puff of breeze and seem to be lifting out very comfortably over the top of the pink boat. So things are changing around all the time. And just to give you the perspective on what the Norddeutscher Regatta Verein that we're looking there, they are in 5th place at the moment, just 1 point outside of the top 4. So this is critical for Tobias Schadewald, the skipper of Norddeutscher, to get a good score in this race. And currently the Germans doing extremely well, as are the Italians. But Regatta Club Oberhofen at the moment would be in danger of falling down the rankings if they stay in this sort of mid-fleet position where they are right now.
Well, we've got a lot of movement, and you can see why the boat's now taking these more tacks and trying to keep themselves in that mid-section of the race course. The breeze moving around from 25 up to 30 degrees. So as they came off that start line, that breeze moving round towards that left side, which is where they all took that little bit of a header, and it favoured the Italians, Circolo della Vellabari here, as they were coming away from that line. But then that breeze started to move back round towards the right, and so you can see a lot more manoeuvres going in. They're all trying to hug a bit more this middle part of the course and give themselves the options to be able to head out towards the right or the left. Commit yourself to one side at the moment would be pretty detrimental to your race. But certainly that right-hand side has got a bit more favouritism. We look over towards the far side, Norddeutscher Regatta Verein. They're right out on that in the pink colours there. They'll probably go into attack fairly shortly. They're not too far off that ley line. And again, a big commitment to go to that ley line early and then come back across. And there we also see Regatta Club Oberhofen choosing to make their way back out of that right-hand side again. And that was interesting off that start line. They were closed out by that committee boat. They took that tack out early and committed to that right-hand side. So initially what they did was they missed the first 2 shifts off that race. But what it did do was it enabled them to get back onto that 3rd shift and get back into the race. And that's what you've got to do. You've got to accept at some point you might miss a shift, be on the wrong side and get back into the system than you have by trying and fight your way back and follow everybody else.
And as we look at that picture there, it looks like the Italians are fading a bit on the left-hand side. We're on board with the Italians, and Simone Ferraresi must have thought he was going to cross the pink boat of Norddeutscher Regatta Verein. Now it must be a little bit more in doubt. Who's going to come out ahead? It's really down to the luck of the draw, how the breeze has played out, either on the left or the right-hand side. But it looks like he's going to have to give way to Norddeutscher Regatta Verein. Or what's he going to do? What's he going to do? Does he think he can cross? Very close. Going into attack, so he's just ahead of Norddeutscher Regatta Verein and putting bad air on the Germans. Surely the Germans can't afford to live there for too long.
Now, and what's fantastic about these 2 boats, locking horns already at the top part of the race course. These 2 are battling it out for those all-important final four spots. And at the moment, where these places sit, this will put them in sort of third, fourth places on that final situation. So at the moment, this is a huge battle for both of these boats. But where they are at the moment, they will be both doing enough to secure themselves into that final at the moment. So at the moment, pressure's on, but they're in the controlling situation. For Regatta Club Oberhofen, they're the ones that have got to really start to find some speed, make their way back up through that fleet as the rest of the fleet start to close in. 2 boats from that right-hand side, 3 now from the left. The map here identifying exactly where Regatta Club Oberhofen are. They've come out pretty well from how that start was, up into third, and so all the 3 clubs that we expected to see up there are in those top 3.
Yes, so Regatta Club Oberhofen recovering well and doing just enough to keep themselves in contention for the top 4 overall, but they've got a lot of people breathing down their necks, whereas there's a match race going on out front with a bit of breathing space for the first 2, and it's the pink boat Norddeutsche that jibe away first. Circolo della Valabari, this is where the wheels started to fall off their race yesterday when they were leading, and they didn't jibe soon enough, and by the bottom mark they were in all kinds of trouble. Well, that hasn't put off the Italians from following the same tactic and still keeping faith with their side of the course. And in fact, now we see the pink boat jibing again, which suggests that Tobias Schadewald doesn't really like what he had there. To do 2 such quick successive jibes suggests that he doesn't really like the breeze in the middle of the course.
Well, looking at that, it's also a defensive manoeuvre if he's doing it as that. He's getting away from the Italians a little bit because the angles certainly aren't very nice looking at that, so he is trying to cover. But look at Regatta Club Oberhofen. He's put himself on that inside, so quite a defensive manoeuvre as well. So whether he's trying to protect that and because of that lost a little bit of focus on the Italians, but certainly from Circolo della Valabari, they have extended their lead out, staying on that side, enabling to look at the distance now. This is a great shot. They're about to go into their jibe now, and you can see the breathing space they've got back to the other team. And so even though there's a little bit of a gap back to them, that is a comfortable amount of breathing space for them, when suddenly now Norddeutsche Regatta Verein and Regatta Club Oberhofen are really locked horns and fairly tight to each other. So you can see the distance between them, only sort of 25 metres, and that suddenly isn't a lot in this breeze.
No, well, those extra jibes have really hurt the Germans, and they're very much in second place now, whereas they were vying for first. And the Italians, they held faith with their 1 jibe option of going all the way into the corner on starboard jibe, and this time it seems to be paying off because that 40-metre gap is about as comfortable as you ever see on these short course 2-lap races. And the Italians now have the pick of either of those lured gate marks, and it will be, they're pretty even in terms of one isn't favoured over the other, so which side they choose to go really will be down to which side of the course
jibe
Simone thinks is going to give him the better breeze as they come out of the bottom of the course.
So jibing going back up the same way they came downwind. So that's generally a golden rule within sailing. If you're slightly unsure what to do or on your plan, is whichever way you went upwind, you go back down the same way downwind, or whichever way you came downwind, you tend to go back up the same way on that way. So this is a really nice way of being able to extend their lead. You can see trying to get the speed back on, sitting on that leeward side.
And Norddeutsche Regatta Verein now rounding the pink Jenica, about to come down through that jibe drop and following the Italians around the same mark. So clearly the leaders who have the choice of choosing either side are liking the left-hand side of the beat. And it looks like the pink boat has pulled out a good chunk of distance on Regatta Club Oberhofen that at one point were quite close behind them. But Regatta Club Oberhofen, the red boat, about to get its Jenica down, now back in the traffic and fighting hard to hold on to third place ahead of the fleet.
Well, that's fantastic sort of manoeuvre from the rest of the fleet. They've all been able to keep themselves fairly clean, coming down actually the opposite side. So it shows how neutral this race course is. And so picking those shifts, the breeze we have got constantly moving around that average breeze. And this creating a separation here as Norddeutsche Regatta Verein, they take the tack out back into the middle. Will we see the Italians take that tack as well and put a covering tack on? I'm surprised we haven't seen them go there just to protect that, keep themselves at the front. but they obviously seem very comfortable with the shift they're on.
And it looked to me like the pink boat had a better piece of wind to come out of the bottom of the course, and they seem to be climbing up the inside of the Italians, and then they tacked away with speed. And I think the Germans were able to come back at the Italians. But having said that, that last shot that we saw, it looks like Germany is falling away into no breeze. The black boat on the left-hand side seems to have a higher track. And so we'll see if, as Corky has illustrated there with his beautiful yellow lines, there seems to be better breeze for the Italians on the left-hand side. And Norddeutsche Regatta Verein, are they in danger of losing second place even to Regatta Club Oberhofen? Things seem to be caving in for the Germans on the right-hand side.
Well, it's really interesting, sort of, that they are on a much lower track, but are we going to start to see Cercolo della Vellabari hit that same breeze as they come back across towards the mid, and then suddenly that then puts them on the slightly weaker foot as they're coming back on that port weaker shift. So maybe, you know, from the German side of things, they're getting out towards that right, they're dealing with that hit early, and then they're going to take this benefit. But again, sailing that sort of strategy and taking that sort of hit just to get to one side of the course, it's pretty tough, and I say it's a high-risk one. I certainly wouldn't feel that comfortable from if I was on the Deutsche Regatta Verein at the moment. Just as you can see there, they look very still in the water. There's not a lot of breeze as the camera passes as we track with them. And look at the gap suddenly still open up, 30 metres and still extending. And look at the lead now. Look at the angle from the Italians as it seems to be curving up away from the rest of the fleet. That's a huge shift out towards that left-hand side, but no one else seems to really have hooked into it apart from Regatta Club Ovenhoven. The actual angles aren't really making a lot of sense in that way, from all of the boats all pointing in a relatively sort of strange angle, but there's definitely been that less shift. Now it's starting to come back a little bit. The Italians back down to a normal track, but look at the gain instantly made. 20-30 metres just within 30 seconds.
Incredible, and I wonder if we can put that down to luck or judgment. I tend to think there's a bit of luck there, but I think this is a bit of karma for the Italians, because I think they were dealt quite a tough hand yesterday when they dropped from 1st to 8th place. Well, they've been leading for most of this race now, and things seem to be playing their way. It seems like the wind gods decided that they were given a particularly hard hand yesterday, and it's coming back for the Italians just when they need it the most, just when this is possibly and quite likely the last race that they will do in qualifying before they find out whether they get into the final four for the finals, which start at 2 o'clock this afternoon, which is only an hour and a half away.
Well, again, they had a tough day yesterday. They picked up a couple of, on their head it had to sit with some silly mistakes and picking up some penalties, which, again, with such a format as the Sailing Champions League, where there is no discard and every single point counts, this is why the pressure's on for all of these sailors to actually cash in and really secure these solid results, because you throw in one bad result now and you can drop yourself from that top first 2-3 boats and see yourself right down into the teens. So pretty tough at the moment. So
a boat we haven't even mentioned so far, the KSSS boat number 2 on the right hand side is now vying for the top spots. So will Bjorn Hansen and KSS be able to come up into it? Doesn't look like it. It looks like Norddeutsche Regatta Verein are holding on to second place, and now Regatta Club Oberhofen, the red boat, coming in behind them. Will they be able to get round in 3rd place before the Swedish are able to get them on starboard? It looks like the Swiss are able to tack around in a vital 3rd place. They really can't afford to drop any lower than 3rd in this race, because then they would be in danger of falling out of the top 4 overall.
To reinforce exactly what you've just said is that the first 3 boats have rounded and stayed in their same positions. The places haven't changed. They've all been 1st or 2nd or 3rd in their prominent place. The boat that has been making the moves is the boat that we're on board with, is the Swedish team. They have moved up from where they were 6th at that first mark. They're now up to 4th. So they have been a team that have been pushing and trying to make gains. We know they're a very experienced team, a lot of knowledge on board, and capable of doing it, but there's not a lot of racetrack still to be able to pull up any gaps, and they're not far behind Regatta Club Ovenhofen, so there is still one place they could possibly pick off and that is the battle that's going to happen. But certainly for the first two boats, it all looks pretty comfortable with the gaps.
Except to say, on the left of picture, well, we see them jibe now. Again, the Italians always going hard into this corner of the racecourse, and it worked beautifully for them on the previous leg. Will it work for them again? It looks like it will. I just think tactically they leave themselves quite exposed when they do that. But as you can see now, the black boat in front of picture is going to pull easily in front of the pink boat, the Germans, who hold second place.
Well, it comes down to that sort of which angle are you trying to sail? Are you trying to go that low and slow route, which you can see a lot of the other boats are? They're trying to soak down, minimise that distance, but sacrifice a little bit of speed. And these guys have sailed that slightly higher angle, wanted that speed, but it is risky. I agree with you totally on that, is that if you don't get that extra bit of breeze that enables that speed for the boat to actually pick up that pace and warrant that extra distance, then you could be shooting yourself in the foot. But at the moment, done nicely. Look at the lead extending still. They've done a textbook race and have been very, very comfortable out in front.
The pink boat now going into a big roll jibe. Tobias Schadewald and his crew pulling the boat upright, getting some good acceleration out of the J70, and a very comfortable second place for them right now. The Italians take that win, and that was absolutely vital for them. Having finished last in their previous race yesterday afternoon, that first place will take them back up somewhere into the top 4 overall, and this is just when they need to be doing it. So Simone Ferraresi not fazed by the poor performance yesterday afternoon. Meanwhile, Norddeutsche Regatta Verein, they were sitting just outside the top 4. Will this second place be enough to get them up into the top 4? We'll have to wait and find out in a while, but a pretty solid race sailed by Tobias Schadewald and his crew.
But an amazing battle still going on with Regatta Club Ovenhofen and the Swedish team. They are neck and neck alongside each other, looking for a jibe bit. There was a call and trying to hold them up onto the side. A late jibe going in, but also another boat rolling in over the top of them. So we've got 3 boats side by side. They are all battling it out for that finish line. Regatta Club Ovenhofen, we're in a really tight situation. There we see them. Now the 3 boats. So the 2 boats we were looking at, Regatta Club Ovenhofen on the right, the Swedish in the middle. But look at the speed coming over and being rolled over from over the top. I believe it to be the Austrian team, Union Yacht Club Wörthersee. Look at the speed. Because those 2 got so focused on each other, have they got the speed and the momentum to take the extra points, jump up to 4th place, and that will see a real rock go down towards Regatta Club Ovenhofen. There they have. They've managed to roll through and take 4th place. Union Yacht Club Wörthersee, a great inside jibe as they let these 2 boats battle it out. And the wheels completely came off in that final situation.
And to use another metaphor, I think maybe that could be the nail in the coffin for Regatta Club Oberhofen. They were overall leaders in the standings going into the race, but to drop from 3rd, we said at the top of that last leg, they can't afford to drop any lower than 3rd. Well, to drop down to 5th is an absolute disaster for them. And I don't know if Tim Kruse will have an opportunity to speak to them out on the water, but that would be an interesting interview if he's brave enough to do it.
Well, that's a really tough one for them. You could see them not going that quickly down that downwind leg. Swedish team hooked inside. They had an overlap. There was clearly they were trying to jibe, but they wouldn't allow them to jibe. And then there was a little bit of a kerfuffle where they wanted to jibe. Both kites collapsed. They lost that speed, and that's exactly where that speed then came in from Union Club Wörthersee. They took the jibe on the inside. They used that speed, the momentum to carry them straight over the top, and that was a big hit to Regatta Club Ovenhofen, sliding them back 2 places, and now sees them 6th overall, which is out of that famous 4.
Let's take let's take a look at the overall leaderboard after that race. So we see Société Nautique de Genève lifted to 1st place. Ciclo della Velabari, that 1st place takes them to 2nd overall. Absolutely vital win for them just then. Deutsche Touring Yacht Club in 3rd for Germany, and another German team, Wassersportverein Hemelingen, in 4th place. And Norddeutsche Regatta Verein, they got a 2nd place. Pretty good, but right now not good enough to get them into the top 4. If only they've managed to win that race, they may well have been sitting in the top 4, but look at Regatta Club Oberhofen. They will be kicking themselves after that final run to the finish when they dropped from 3rd to 5th, because that, as you can see, those 2 points are the difference between them being able to sit in the top 4 and now languishing just outside in 6th place. And St. Petersburg Yacht Club in 7th, another Russian team, Pirogovo, in 8th. The Danish all-female crew representing the Royal Danish Yacht Club in 9th, and in 10th we just saw them roll over Regatta Club Oberhofen right at the finish. KSSS sitting in 10th place. So absolutely gutting for them. So we have Tim Kruse out on the water, and I believe he's about to talk to the Italians who won that race.
Exactly, Andy. We're out now. We're just looking at the table because yesterday I interviewed them, and they, after the 8th place, they had 2 penalties. They had the most terrible race you can ever imagine, and they were totally devastated. So I interviewed Simone Ferraresi. Yes, I said it correct, right? Correct. And he was just so down, and now he's so happy. First of all, congratulations to such a great race. Now you showed that you're really one of the best sailors here. So what's the difference? Like, was it just a good day today, or what's the difference to yesterday?
Maybe today we were a bit more focused and also maybe a bit more lucky. That is quite important in this place.
Yes. Please don't be disturbed at home if you see a sailing boat getting into the picture.
Also, now that I see Bjorn, we try to be far from Bjorn because from the past I know that I'm collecting a lot of penalties from him.
You okay?
No, actually...
People are breaking their legs just now, but don't worry.
Actually, we planned seriously the start on the left. We liked the left the whole time, and it was playing well. So we had a good boat speed, good start, and yeah, the race was quite easy going on the left. Of course, could have been much worse in the second because this place is there being a lot of surprises.
So after yesterday, we thought you're out. You're not going to make the final, but now you're in again. So how important is a race like yesterday for your mental stability? Like, you know, when you have an 8th place, it didn't really touch you, did it? So that means you must be very stable.
Yeah, what we try to do is to take the race one per time. So every race is counting like the championship, and the pressure is only coming from doing a really good race and sail really well in that race, not thinking about the standings or about the last race or the next, because it's quite useless.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Simone. I'm happy to interview you today after yesterday, because you asked me, why did you come yesterday? I said, well, they sent me. No, it's a great job. Thank you so much, guys, and good luck. Maybe see you in the final. Could well happen. Thanks a lot, guys. Mille grazie.
Thanks very much, Tim, out on the water, and another interesting interview with Simone Ferraresi. Tim was saying how happy Simone looks today. Actually, I can't really tell much difference between a Simone Ferraresi that's just come last and a Simone Ferraresi that's just come first. And for an Italian, I think that's quite unusual, because normally they are the most effusive, enthusiastic nation that you can think of in Europe. And what I like about Simone Ferraresi is that he seems extremely level-headed. He doesn't get down when he finishes last and he gets dealt a bad hand. And he doesn't get super up. He wasn't super excited for having won that race either. And I think that quality is really important at this level in any sport, isn't it?
Massively. And what you've got to remember is the number of races that are in here. There's no discards, and so every single point matters. That one slip up in the race that they had yesterday, that slid them way down on the leaderboard. But then coming back strong, knowing that any of your other competitors could have a bad race as well. And when you're into that situation, it's not simply just, oh, I've had a bad race, okay, well, here we go. It's got to be completely clear. Right, that's happened. Put it behind us. Let's learn from this. Get on. We've got lots more races. This is not over. And they've come out, and they've come out absolutely firing. But he's not going to be certainly bouncing around ecstatic at the moment, because at the moment they need to get themselves in that top 4, secure their place to get into the final, and then they still won't be happy unless they come away with that trophy at the end of it.
He was also very honest, I thought, about getting a piece of luck in that race, and he really gambled on the left-hand side of that course, both upwind and downwind. And, well, it would be interesting to look at some analysis of that race. So, Corky, if you could roll us back through the race just now.
Well, let's have a quick look at the start and how it all panned out to start with. So straight off the bat, we saw the Italian Circolo Velabari down on this pin end here, right off here, we can see then taking this track towards that left-hand side. That was instantly where that went off. The Regatta Club Ovenhofen, you can see, got a little bit stuff, moved out towards that right-hand side, and that's where it all started to become a little bit tricky for them. But either side of the racecourse worked quite well as long as you played those shifts. So Norddeutsche Regatta Verein, they took that tack into the middle, protecting the covering tack from the Italians, and that was how it was all panned out to start with. So now let's look at that in the live pictures. So here it is. So that nice roll tack, they came in on that port approach, means that you can see the whole fleet, how it's panning out, and look at the acceleration and speed they come away from that. Everyone else still trying to, Norddeutsche Regatta Verein there, you can see, trying to build speed. The Italians came in with speed, tacked in, and then that's where the position played out. Now let's just move it forward as they come up through the first leg. You can see a lot more shifts and a lot more constant movement of that wind. So more maneuvers being played out. But this is exactly where it comes down to that speed, maneuvers, and distance sailed. You're always trying to minimize the distance, maximize the speed, and of course minimize the maneuvers. Here we saw Norddeutsche Regatta Verein getting into a bit of a pickle, trying to add a few more jibes in and a few more tacks, and exactly the same with Regatta Club Ovenhofen. The Italians stayed true to their form and their strategy, minimized the amount of maneuvers, and as you said, Andy, they hugged that left-hand side. A little bit of a commitment to it, but with how the breeze was, they stayed in control, and this was the leg. Look at how much they extend out because they get that big left shift, and that's where suddenly all the other boats compacted as they come up to this top mark. This is where the place is changed. The lead extends for the Italians, but for the Germans, they squeeze on round, but Regatta Club Ovenhofen and the Swedish team lock horns, but it's still all the way down until we see the Union Yacht Club Wörthersee watching this battle unfold in front of them, take that jibe slightly earlier and enable them to maximize their speed out of that jibe and roll over the top. So again, two teams getting quite blinkered and trying to take each other out and causing that situation. So let's have a quick look at the finish as we came in towards that finish line. Once we talked about, don't show a huge amount of emotion, but they're pretty happy with that. A thumbs up, please. The team are happy, nice and content. But let's have a little look at the, as we were talking about, the speed, distance maneuvers. The top of the board, very simple. Okay, they sailed a little bit more distance, but that was because we were saying they sailed a higher angle on those downwind legs. Rather than soaking low, accepted the higher distance, but look at the speed gain. Much quicker on the speed, and again, minimizing those maneuvers. Because they stayed out in front, they were able to do that. Suddenly, you look at Regatta Club Ovenhofen. Yes, there was a shorter distance, but quite a lot of maneuvers and that speed, and that was what enabled the jump to happen at the finish. So some amazing things going on out on the water, and a really nice, well played out race from the Italians there, but certainly some mistakes still being thrown in by these top teams.
So a beautifully sailed race by the Italians there, and as Tim Cruz mentioned, he talked about their mental state. They seem to be quite stable. That 8th place yesterday really didn't affect them. Based on what you saw just then, coming into the start of the next race coming up in a few minutes' time, where would you want to be on the start line?
I would still be protecting the mid to pin end. I've seen that time and time again, coming off from that mid to pin end. Again, there's enough runway off that start line to give them that. If the breeze shifts to the right slightly, they've got a long enough period of time to ride up on that starboard tack. If it heads, which is what we've seen time and time again, it enables those boats to peel off and then you to be onto that first left-hand shift. And you're in a really controlling position to get yourself back into the middle fleet. And if you're anywhere in that top 2 or 3 boats at that windward mark, you're in a real fight for that top boat. And that's so I would be very protective of that. I would, if not, be looking to approach on port a lot more. It gives you a greater option to see the fleet. And that was basically a textbook start from the Italians. They did exactly that. They kept an eyes on it. People are bundling up towards that committee boat. It may be biased at 30 seconds to go, and suddenly at the start gun, the line's neutral, or if not, it's at the pin end. So it's not a matter of chasing that bias. It's a matter of putting yourself where you want to be 30 seconds after that start and hitting that first shift.
And considering what a poor start they had, Regatta Club Oberhofen actually didn't do too badly, really. I mean, to get themselves back up into third by halfway up that first beat, I thought was quite impressive. And I thought maybe we'd see them challenging to come through for second place over Norddeutsche Regatta Verein. But I don't know if we can say that was an error towards the end, or if they just got swallowed up by the chasing pack. Sometimes that's just the nature of the beast, isn't it?
Well, watching that very last section with the Swedish, it looked like they had an inside line, so it was stopping them from jibing. When they wanted to jibe and started to go into a jibe, the Swedish actually luffed a little bit, which caused them to luff up. Both kites collapsed because they were quite aggressive manoeuvres. Certainly in the breeze that we've got here, you're not going to get away with that. But because of that, it was the right manoeuvre for the Swedish to do, but because it killed their speed as well, that's where we saw Union Yacht Club Wörthersee just go, well, thanks very much, you have a lovely fight over there, and I'm going to roll over the top. And that's what happens. You don't keep an eye on behind you, you're going to lose out.
So maybe Bjorn Hansen for a moment got back into match racing mode a little bit too much and forgot that there was another boat close by.
Exactly that.
Yeah, so they both lost out. So we're just a couple of minutes away from the start of the next race, and we are going to be getting into flight number 8. Now, as our race officer Philip said, we may not be able to get all the way through this flight because there's 4 races per flight for the 31 teams that are represented here. It's now 12:45 local time, and the last race we expect in qualifying to start around 1:30. So this, I'm guessing, could be the penultimate race. So we'll come into that race very shortly.
The next race is presented by Uvia.
So, Flight 8, Race 1. We are 1 minute 50 away from that. Two of the ones to feature are 2 German teams here. Segelkameradschaft das Wappen von Bremen. And Das Wappen von Bremen apparently applies to, or relates to, some shield that the people of Bremen are very proud about. Gordon Nickel, Lisa Schalke, Thomas Dahler and Max Augustin. And then the other team, Norddeutsche Regatta Verein, getting second in that race just now. Well, they're back on the water, and you can be sure that Tobias Schadewald and his crew will be fighting every inch of the way. But they really stand only an outside chance of being able to get into the top 4 now. We're 1 minute away from the start. That's Tobias Schadewald on the right-hand side, and his crew will be thinking hard about the next start.
Well, we talk about that they stand an outside chance. Yes, they're a couple of points off that top 4, and so it is only a couple of points. But as we've said before, it is easy just to drop one clanger of a race in, and that can change all of it. So it is an outside chance. We can see on this start line there's a little bit of a pin end bias, so that left-hand mark closest towards the left-hand side, we'll probably see the boats lining up and wanting to attack this left side. They will have watched that last race and known how the Italians, Circolo della Valle Bari, came off that start line, so they'll equally be trying to do the same. And as I mentioned, being that sort of mid-left-hand side, it gives them nice control. So boats starting to creep up towards the start line. Again, very interesting seeing boat number 5, very slow, not building speed, now trying to put the bow down. They're close to that line, but they should be trying to build speed to hit that line with speed. So very tight, a great start coming off from Tobias Schadewald there. Exactly what we've done. He saw that in that last race. He was protective of that side as well, but it was just the Italians' port tack dropped in behind them. Look at the header now, come on. We just saw that big steer from him. The bow came down a little bit more, speed starting to build. You'll see boats starting to peel off over towards the right if that was the right header, but they're all locking horns and holding each other into play. Boats now starting to tack out, but great speed, great control, and we see the winner of that start again coming from that pin end and in complete control, and if not starting to distance themselves from the fleet.
So NRV just rolling into attack. They absolutely controlled that start. They got exactly the start they wanted, and the fleet is off to the right hand side of them. Everyone has tacked onto port tack. So already just 1 minute into this race, and the Germans have some control over the other 7 boats in the fleet. Very good start for them. So NRV pretty much emulating what the Italians did to be able to beat them in the previous race. But boat number 2 also looking strong. That's Segelkameradschaft Wappen von Bremen. So actually the right-hand side has come back much more strongly, and suddenly things not looking nearly so good for Norddeutsche Regatta Verein. The commentator's curse, I'm afraid, has struck Tobias Schadewald, and we're seeing a different wind pattern this time, and it's Groningen and Segelkameradschaft on the right-hand side who are profiting from this change in the breeze.
Well, certainly more breeze starting to filter in from that right side, but a very good tactical decision from Tobias Schadewald there, taking that tack on that inside. So yes, he potentially lost out a boat or 2, but he's in sync with those shifts. So as they go back again, he'll be able to get himself a nice lane. So you won't see him go much further across here. All the boats starting to tack out and go back towards the right. I'd be surprised to see him further go out towards that left, unless he's deciding that he's going to roll the dice a little bit more. He wants that left-hand side. We know it's going to be, it's come good before, but that breeze certainly stronger on that right. And going back towards that last race, we talked about Regatta Club Ovenhofen. They stayed out on that mid to right-hand side, but they kept themselves away from it. So there's certainly breeze situation that either side is favourable. There isn't one side that you're going to stick to. And so actually doing what Tobias is here, heading out towards this left-hand side, protecting this left side. Okay, you can see him, head constantly going up, quick glance over that shoulder, checking the rig setup. They'll go into attack now. A little bit of leeward roll, then the full weight comes in to try and generate that roll. Accelerate back out over the top. So yes, they will have lost out a couple of boats over towards that right-hand side, but now he's hoping that this left shift will bring them back into it. At the moment, the right still staying on that slightly stronger side. It's moved over towards that right and staying there.
So Germans on either side of the course, and the question now is, will it be pink on the left or blue on the right that comes out best off? And in fact, the bulk of the fleet are very far left, so maybe everyone's been paying attention to what happened in the previous race and seeing just how strongly the left worked for the Italians. It's only Segel Club St. Moritz on the far side, the local team from this very lake, who are on the right-hand side.
No, it's interesting sort of that they're committing themselves this far. I'd be surprised if they don't just put one hard tack straight in front of Tobias, but I feel that Tobias potentially is going straight across in front of them with that left shift. So because we're on board with them, you won't see where they are. So let's have a quick glance over the shot. There they are, right in shot. So they went back again, now approaching from that port side. So even though they lost out that little bit, because they came back on that shift, they're still very much in this battle, but they need these points. They need to get themselves further up that leaderboard, because as we said, they are on an outside chance, and it's going to be reliant on all other competitors to how they fit. They're going to get squeezed here.
Segelkameradschaft just rolling into attack. Groningen ahead of them, the Dutch team. Gordon Nickel maintaining control over the other German boat, Norddeutsche Regatta Verein. Well, we'll find out in a moment as they go around the windward mark. They are absolutely neck and neck.
So again, they had that inside line because they were both on the same tack. They had to provide room, but it's gone light at that top end. We see the Dutch taking a jibe out quite early, which is strange because that's where all the traffic is. That is a really slow section. It's called a sort of the diamond of death at their top, as what we talk about in sailing, is the amount of dirty, disturbed air coming off those other boats. That actually to go through that early on is quite a bold move. Rather than you see Norddeutsche Regatta Verein taking that little bit of further on that starboard jibe, clearing themselves away. So the green spinnaker, you can see, struggling to set. That's all because of this dirty air coming down. And so now we look across towards that pink spinnaker. They've already extended out a little bit further. So we see on the leaderboard that switched round. Whether that's completely how it will fit further down on the course, but certainly that's been one of the really big sort of factors. Taking that jibe early, and this is a prime example here. Right in the middle of the course here, they jibed out. And so off this windward mark, we have this diamond here. And inside this is an area where there's not much breeze due to all the other boats trying to round that mark. And then they taking that manoeuvre, trying to get their kite set, jibing back again, has been costly. Tobias Shadovalt's done exactly what the Italians did. Headed out in towards this left-hand side, cleared that air, and we've always seen them come back on that port jibe, looking quite nice and quite good with speed. There we are, a great shot of them. Very happy on board there. You can see the arms punching there. Very pleased with their acceleration forward and where they are, motivating his team. This is where it all matters. They need to secure this, and he's done exactly what he needed to do to get out in front, and it's a matter of now holding it. Look at the boat speed difference between them and the Dutch as well. Big differences from that left-hand side of the racecourse.
Well, very strange hand gestures. It's unusual for someone like Tobias Shadowveld, an Olympic sailor, to get so excited halfway through a race. The job is not done. Surely he's not celebrating already.
Well, no, I don't think he's celebrating. I think he's just really, you've got to be pretty stoked with that manoeuvre, that you've gone round, you've battled it out, tight in second, but then look at the lead you've extended out. Now you've given yourself some real control. They can literally go into defensive mode now. They can switch off from really trying to go in and extend their lead and actually just go, right, we've got one focus to do. We've got to just look backwards. Right, we're going to take this mark. They've tacked. We're going to tack with them. And actually, you're in a lot more of a controlling position. Again, this doesn't mean that they know how it's going to work out on the overall results, but you've put yourself in the best position. So, no, you're not necessarily celebrating, but you're actually giving yourself a good bit of motivation. Your team are going to respond to that as well. So,
well, it's not been handed to them on a plate, hasn't it? I mean, you talked about the Diamond of Death and wondered why the Groningen had gone in there, and you predicted their doom. I mean, you've got to have a really good reason to wander into the Diamond of Death, and it hasn't worked for the Dutch. Okay, they're rounding in second place now, struggling to get that green Jenica down, but that really was a giveaway, surely.
All right, it's in a way, as we class the schoolboy error. Certainly when you're out in front, if you've got that amount of boats coming round, the breeze this light, you accept just extending out that little bit further, having that bit of momentum, getting out towards that side, and then coming back towards the middle when you're a little bit further down. But going for that early jibe in with the pack right behind them, yeah, was just an error that's then basically come up, and that's made it really tricky for them. But as we pan out and look at the actual teams, they're all separating around this sort of this gate mark. We've got, again, the extending lead out from the Deutsche Regatta Freunde coming around that left-hand side. That gap all being created by that Diamond of Death. But look at the shift on those boats out towards the right-hand side. A complete separation of breeze here where we see now this is real trouble for the German team on this left-hand side. Those boats on the right, look at the angle suddenly changing. Those boats on the right have made a ginormous gain from that starboard shift. And again, looking at Tobias Shadowval coming back on that left-hand side, trying to recoup that. Those boats now starting to take that knock back down. But
for a moment, it looked really dangerous there, didn't it? And they're not out of the woods yet. I mean, they still look vulnerable on that left-hand side, Corky. And you can see the pink boat. He's having to steer that boat through every shift, and it seems to be caving in a little bit for them at the moment.
But the boats coming back on the right are now starting to get into that header. So it's exactly what we saw off that start line. That first third of that beat, that right-hand shift coming in, you get a little bit of a lift out of it. It looks fantastic. Then it starts to head in the midsection. So actually, it's one of those tricky ones. Do you go towards the right to gain that advantage? But then actually, as a longer-term game, you're better off being on that mid-left side to actually protect that side and be able to come back. Exactly what these guys are doing now, taking that tack back in front of them and controlling the fleet. This is where they're just going to be keeping their eyes, keeping themselves between them, the competitors and their mark. And that's what their focus is. But again, I think that was exactly all that was happening. There is that little right-hand shift straight off that. But looking at the angles where they're all going at now, I'm surprised, even though it's a defensive manoeuvre, that he took that tack on that shift. I would have carried on potentially on that port shift because that was the lifting tack, and it would have taken him closer to that mark. So we talk about the long tack, looking for that tack to take you closer to the mark. He's now tacking back. So I'm just surprised they didn't stay on that and minimise a couple of manoeuvres.
Well, I think you're thinking more like an Italian, and I'm thinking more like a German, because I like what he's done with those extra 2 tacks. Yes, it's a little bit expensive, but we've seen the power of the left, and he was sort of herding the fleet by tacking over onto starboard. He was herding the fleet in that direction. So he's given up some distance, but his position on the race course, I think, leaves him a little bit safer. But it's a sort of a difference in philosophy. I'm not sure that we can say that one is right and one is wrong. It's sort of just 2 different ways of approaching the course.
No, exactly. What he did was a defensive and better way of handling it. But again, minimising manoeuvres and going from that the speed side could have been a difference. But you can see the tension still on board. Just on that last picture, you could see Tobias shouting at that boat, the film boat, just going past. They're not really making any weight, but every single distraction, every single thing they can feel like is going to be detrimental to their effect. And look how close it is. So we've got Club de Voile, Saint-Aubin-Elbeuf coming in round in second place. So they have really closed the gap on it. But the ones that have lost out, of course, we've talked about them, were the Dutch with Groningen. They were out towards that right-hand side, tacking there, and have literally skidded themselves back down the pack. And that all was because of that jibe at that last top windward mark.
Segel, Kameradschaft, well, they made a bit of a mess at the top of the last run as well. They jibed early into the Diamond of Death, but they seem to be back up into 3rd place. So a bit of a get out of jail for them. Groningen coming around behind the Hourglass boat that now just shakes out the Hourglass out of its sail, leaving Groningen a chance to get down inside them. Are they going for the jibe again, or just going very deep? It looks like they're just going deep. Okay, so 5th place. Not a disaster for Groningen, but considering that, well, maybe I should call it a disaster. They were leading this race, and really strange, as we said a lap ago, for them to have jibed the way they did. But now there is no runaway winner right now. The Deutsche Regatta Verein, they are still leading, but it's going to be tense on board that boat with Tobias Schadewald. He seems very animated in this race, very pumped up for trying to win this race, but on a much higher angle on starboard jibe this time round. So there's not much breeze out there, and there is every opportunity for the likes of Club de Voile, Saint-Aubin to be able to attack them.
Well, it's the same scenario that we saw in the last race. Where do you go with an asymmetric? You've got your 2 options. Do you go low and slow and soak down and try and protect that distance, give yourself that opportunity to come up if you need to hold that higher line, enable you to jibe and keep that inside line on your competitors? Or do you sail that slightly higher angle, maximise speed, try and generate a bit more apparent breeze, and sail a higher angle faster? You sail a slightly greater distance, but because of the increase in speed, that should then also favour out. That's what we saw happen with Cercolo della Velabari in the last one. Tobias Schadewald on the Deutsche Regatta Verein, they did exactly that as on that first leg, but now a little bit more nervous of that side. But he's jibed in a very defensive position. He's still in control here, keeping himself in between that and the mark. They've got a nice little bit of breeze moving down. He's not far. He's about 150 metres away from that finish line, so it's all looking fairly comfortable for him. And that lead starting to stretch out now, over 30 metres and extending, as those other 2 boats start to try and wonder how they're going to take each other out. Can they get past each other? So this is exactly what we saw in the last one. Regatta Club Ovenhofen and the Swedish taking themselves out and losing focus on other people. So will we see the same again as the other boats start to close in on those 2nd and 3rd place boats?
Well, those onboard shots of Tobias Schadewald, he really does wear his emotions on his face, a big exhale, and I think he's starting to breathe a bit of a sigh of relief. But I'm wondering if Tobias Schadewald and Simone Ferraresi were given the wrong passports. It seems like Tobias is more the Italian and Simone is more the cool, calm German. they're starting to fist bump, so they're starting to relax, and they feel they've got this one in the bag. And
well, they've done everything they possibly can. This on the leaderboard, without, of course, the other flights being run at the moment, would sit them in 5th. But of course, then we've got the average points coming in from the other boat. So that will be the deciding factor to whether they creep into that final 4 or whether they will sit on the fence right at that last point. But they have done everything they possibly can. They'll be very, very pleased with that last one. The only thing that might have changed their position would have been if they had won that last race that they were able to be in. But
we'll have to wait and see on that. We've got other boats crossing the line now. We've got Segel Kameradschaft, Wappen von Bremen, who move up to 2nd across the line. So they managed to overtake the French on the final run to the finish. Club de Voile Saint-Aubin-Boeuf in 3rd place. Segel Club St. Moritz, one of their best scores for the local team from this very lake, in 4th place. Groningen, they were leading that race until they sailed into Corky's Diamond of Death. They should have listened to Corky, but they didn't, and they dropped to 5th. Yacht Club Bregenz from Austria in 6th. And some way back is, I believe, Mariehamns Segler Verening, and we've hardly mentioned them, from Finland. And also in that race, Yacht Club Monaco. I don't know what happened to them. They are some way at the back as well. So congratulations to Tobias Schadewald. Very animated display from him. Looked like he was celebrating halfway through the race, but I think maybe he was gesticulating to one of the camera boats. And we got a soft spot for Tobias because sometimes he's our co-commentator on some of these races, but he much prefers doing the real business out there on the water, as he did just then, winning that race. I wouldn't say comfortably, but sailing a very, very tactically astute race. There were times up that first beat. They got exactly the start they wanted, and it looked like things were going to go bad for them on the left-hand side, but they held their nerve and they came back extremely well.
Well, something that we talked about and I highlighted about that leaderboard, the pressure fully on now. So Wassersportverein Hemmelingen will be itching to get another race in. They need to get this other race in because the average points, they are currently sat in 4th, but the average points work out that they will get 2.85 for their rest of the races, which will give them 22.85 points. So that will be 0.85 more than the Deutsche Regatta Verein, which will see them jump in. So Tobias Schadewald, potentially, if there's no more racing in Wassersportverein Hemmelingen, get this next race in. If they don't get it in, Tobias Schadewald, with that final race, will have seen himself slide into that final 4.
Okay, so it's going to come down to fractions of a point as to who gets through. And it's a number of German teams that are sitting on the cusp of making it into the final 4, along with Regatta Club Oberhofen, who had that awful race earlier. They are also with an outside chance of going through, but we're now sitting on 6 minutes past 1. The last possible start of the qualifying phase of this competition is 1:30. So realistically, I think we can only expect to get one more race in of Flight 8, and then it is going to come down to the calculations of average points and who has put in the best average performance over the last 4 days of competition. And we've got a changeover of crew. Very fast turnovers going on here. So with 8 boats on the water, 8 J70s, 31 teams from 12 nations. They've got very used to jumping in and jumping out of these boats. They're all set up identically. You can't tweak it. You can't retune it. You've got to live with it as it is. And I haven't heard anyone complain about one boat being faster than another. So we haven't seen the black boat or the yellow boat or the pink or any of those being favoured over any other. So that's a great sign of a well-managed fleet.
Well, it's a well-managed fleet, full stop. But it's also the races are so short and the turnaround so quick that you don't have those times to go, right, we're going to go for a nice tuning run. We're going to set up. Okay, we've raced an hour's worth of racing. Let's move this. There isn't that opportunity. The boats, you've seen them jump in. The flag has to go on. Their name goes on. They get set up. They have to start analysing the start. Where do they want to be? What they're going to do in this race. And that's it. So for that chance for all the boats, and this is why it's such a great format, they literally are able to jump straight in and all the boats are the same and off they go.
So the breeze seems to be just about holding in, and we hope that we'll be able to get race number 2 of Flight 8 underway. Might be interesting to have a look at that overall leaderboard, if we can see that in a moment. We've got Chris Humann at the helm of Frederikshavn Sail Club. I spent a lot of time with these guys on the Nord Stream race just a month or so ago. One of the bonuses of winning your national sailing league, as well as making it through to the Sailing Champions League final, if you're in one of the Baltic nations where the Nord Stream race sails through, from Germany through to Denmark to Sweden, Finland and Russia, you get the chance to race a Club Swan 50 for 3 weeks through the Baltic Sea. It's a 1,000-mile race, and Chris Humann and his crew from Frederikshavn Sail Club in Denmark have represented their nation through the Baltic in a Club Swan 50 for the last two years. So an incredible bonus to be able to take the helm of a multi-million euro yacht through the Baltic. Corky, if you've got an analysis for us of that last race, which was won by Norddeutsche Regattaverein, I'd very much like to see it.
Well, let's have a look straight away. And again, we talk about the start. So here we are, winning the start, coming off from that port end. You can see the actual bias towards that port end, even though it was about 30 seconds before the start, sitting round towards that right side a little bit more. But Norddeutsche Regattaverein coming off that port end, we see the boats take off, and then this is where we saw that little bit of a right-hand shift kick in. So watch those boats on the right, the angle change, they suddenly kick up onto that. Pressure's on for the German team coming in from the left side. They take that tack and then protect that left-hand side. So as we start to speed up, and we'll go up a little bit further on that race course, we're going to jump onto the video of the start. So here's a replay of exactly that. So nice little acceleration from Norddeutsche Regattaverein right off that pin. They nail that start bang on. Other boats slow on that uptake. You see the bow come down. Now there it is, a little bit more of a header as they bear away. They move back down towards this left-hand side. Another little bit of a header. And then as it plays out across the rest of the fleet, we see them making their manoeuvres up the midsection of the fleet. So as they come round that top section, this is where it all worked out. So we talked about this Diamond of Death. Okay, so for the Dutch team over here, they went down into that middle section of the race course, down in towards that, as we highlighted, the Diamond of Death. That was where the breeze suddenly went light. They shuffled round. They struggled for that breeze, and then over towards that left-hand side. That's exactly where we saw Tobias Schadevoort come over towards that left-hand side, make that gain in the same way as the Italians had on that left-hand side, protecting that left side. Again, in that early third part of that first beat, a little bit of a right-hand kick over towards that side. Nice and defensive, slap bang in the middle, focusing all out where they need to, out the back of the boat, concentrating on anyone else, taking that jibe early, protecting that inside line, and then because of the other boats getting involved into the tangle, extending out a nice lead and a nice win out in front. So a fantastic race from the man Tobias Schadevoort, and happens to have just joined us in the studio, looking a bit damper than we are, but a big smile on face. Congratulations. That was a great race. How did you find it?
Thank you very much. It was really thrilling racing. I mean, so difficult conditions, especially with the rain setting in. I didn't really see the wind coming down the course. I just knew this one has to be sort of a bullet, I guess. And I'm very, very pleased that it worked out.
Well, Andy was comparing you to the Italians. There was a lot more emotion coming from your boat. We saw the fist pumps down that first leg where you took that jibe and sailed out a little bit. Then we saw the emotion coming in at that windward mark as the video boat went past. You could see him trying to clear off. So, again, raw emotion coming through and shows how much it means. But by your emotion, does it play through to the crew? Do they all get motivated by that positive sort of drive from yourself? Or?
Well, in that race, certainly it did. I think we all sailed at our best. But I know it's a fine line. If you push it too hard and you get too aggressive and then something goes wrong, you might lose your focus. But I think it just worked out in that race for us.
So I was surprised to see how emotional you were through that race. Were you being emotional about the race, or was it traffic on the race course? What were we seeing from you?
No, it was more myself. I think yesterday I made a bad mistake in the second race. I was really upset with that one because we lost 2 places, and on the first day I didn't really get anything together. So I really wanted to sail well today, and I pushed myself, got really focused, and I think it just means a lot to me. Like the most important regatta for myself this season, and I think that's why I was so emotional, yeah.
Well, we wish you the best for getting through to the Final Four. You're on the cusp of it, but there are other German teams within points of you. We wish you the best for that. We're less than 2 minutes to start the next race. Anyone who would be listening out there, they can't hear you, but what advice would you have for them off the start line of this race?
I felt the left side was better, so I guess I would go there.
I hear that we can keep you in the studio a little bit longer, which would be great. So you got, I would say, the second best start in the race before that. The Italians got the best start. And you really emulated the Italian start in that last race you did. You really wanted the pin. You won it, and you won it at speed as well, didn't you?
Yeah, we practiced quite a lot the start before, and especially the pin end, because I felt the Italians, they sailed so confident on the left-hand side, really leaving everything open wide, which surprised me quite a lot. But I thought, I don't seem to get this leg, so just do what works, and yeah, that's why we nailed the pin.
And we saw you do a few more tacks up the second beat to sail more defensively over towards the left. And Corky and I had a sort of a difference of opinion. He wanted to go a bit more Italian, and I wanted to go a bit more German. But there's not really a right way and a wrong way out there, is there? I mean, it's sort of slightly a difference of philosophy, maybe.
Yeah, and also every beat is different and every scenario is different. So I think once the breeze is a little bit stronger, you might want to go to the middle and protect the fleet. And once it gets too light, maybe go for more for the side. In retrospective, I think our second tack was too late because we should have protected the left-hand side and not the right-hand side. And that's why we lost some meters. But anyway, I mean, it's so easy to say afterwards.
Absolutely. We're all being wise up in the studio. You know what it's like. You do this commentary thing. It's so much easier up here than it is out there.
Certainly it is. But still, guys, I think you're doing a fantastic job. I'm always listening when I watch the races, and it's really, there's a lot of tension in the air. And you transport that.
Well, there certainly is, and I get very tense when I watch you, Tobias, because I can see the excitement on your face. I can see how much it means to you.
Yeah.
We wish you the best. We hope to see you out there in the Final Four, and this will be an interesting experiment for you, because neither you or any of the other teams have ever competed in this Final Four format before.
Certainly, yeah. We practiced it once in training on Lake Ulster in Hamburg back there. I think this, to my mind, if you keep it simple and just sail the regular way you sail, you get the best chances to win. And if you have a bit of a luck, then everything is possible.
Well, you need some luck out there as well. We wish you the best of it, and we wish you great skill as well.
Thank you very much, guys.
Cheers, Toby. Thanks for coming up to see us. Back out onto the water. Let's see how the next race is shaping up. And we've got, in this race, Yacht Club Scheveningen leading the race in the very early stages. The red boat, number 6, it looks like they got one of the best starts out on the left-hand side. So a good start for the Dutch. And the other ones to watch out for here are Société Nautique de Genève, currently in 3rd overall. So the Swiss very much fighting for a place in the Final Four. Regatta Club Oberhofen now vying for the lead here. We saw them muck up that race earlier today, and they made life very difficult for themselves. Now they have a shot at redemption. Will the Swiss team from Oberhofen be able to get themselves back up into the top 4? Quite a split between the two sides, but based on history, you'd like the left-hand side, but at the moment, it looks like Société Nautique de Genève on the right-hand side, the light blue boat, number 2, looking very strong, Corky.
Well, it was something that we talked about a little bit before. Was I'm actually not pretty undecided on which side's actually favoured. That left-hand side we've seen probably about a sort of 70% more favouritism to that side, which is why he might be a little more defensive on that side. And exactly how Tobias just said there, he kind of liked that idea, and then of course so did the Italians in the race before. But that right-hand side, we saw Regatta Club Oberhofen stay on that right-hand side on that early first race, and they've done, that's exactly where that side's come. So I think going into the middle, and exactly what we've just highlighted there, in this breeze is very difficult to defend. You need to commit to one of the sides, keep momentum, minimise those manoeuvres, and allow you to deal with the shifts, alterate around those. And I think sort of that right-hand side has got those nice little right shifts coming in. How long they actually stay for depends on, of course, that. We're racing on a lake. The rain's coming in now. It's harder to see that breeze. So suddenly they're looking out on the water, and what was easier to pick out on the breeze now is actually a lot harder. But Société Nautique de Genève, a great race, staying, minimising those manoeuvres, staying out, protecting that actually mid to right-hand side as they come up, and are in full control at the moment.
Very good sailing by them. Société Nautique de Genève, we're on board with them right now on port tack, but I suspect not for very long because they're not far off the ley line on the right-hand side. And the two boats that are closest to them are also on the hard right. Società Canottieri from Italy and Union Yacht Club Wörthersee from Austria. Still extremely light. You don't want to be tacking more often than you need to, but this is the final tack at the top of the beat for the Swiss, who are going to go round with, by today's standards, a fairly comfortable lead. So they're going to go round a few seconds ahead of anybody else in clear air. And what will they opt for? The straight set. It looks like they're going to stay on starboard jibe initially. A Union Yacht Club Wörthersee from Austria about to go round, skippered by Martin Dietrich. And following them around from Italy, Società Canottieri Gardastello, skippered by Pietro Corbucci. And where are the rest of the fleet?
So the Union Yacht Club Wörthersee, again, we saw them in the previous battle. They were the ones that rolled over the top, made that game right to the finish line. And again, we see them up in second. So they're doing a great job here as we see the Italians taking that jibe out and going down again in that diamond of death. And look how much the boats part. They've not even left the actual screen yet. So I'm surprised people are still trying to do that manoeuvre.
And will it be an opportunity for Regatta Club Oberhofen to take that place away from the Italians? They need every boat they can get. Joachim Scheveningen also around, and Regatta Club Bodensee on board with Société Nautique de Genève leading, and a fairly comfortable lead it is too for the Swiss right now. Julian Flessati, skipper of Regatta Club Bodensee, wishing that he was further up to where the other Swiss team is leading this race at the moment. It's Guillaume Giraud who skippers Société Nautique de Genève. Tim Cruiser interviewed them yesterday afternoon, and they seem to be very at home, which maybe is not that surprising. They are Swiss. They sail on a lake, albeit Lake Geneva's a good deal larger than St. Moritz, and I would think even for them, even for the Swiss visiting St. Moritz Lake, the challenges of such a small lake, so surrounded by trees and mountains, must be pretty tough for them as it is for any of the visiting teams.
What's interesting, we'd like to pick up on sort of the mental resilience and strength, is that you're leading this regatta. You've been able to get another race in. They might have been sitting there thinking time might run out here, we're going to get our average points, everything's going to sit quite comfortably for us. But then to come out and still have that complete pressure on, this is their final race that could hold them in the within the qualification side of things. So a huge amount of pressure on these guys, and to come straight out of this race and be leading it with such kind of, I don't know, strength and confidence in a way. There's got to be a pretty impressive display from this team.
And especially also to put your faith in the right-hand side of the first beat, when the right-hand side really hasn't been that strong in any of the previous races. So I don't know if Guillaume Giraud and his crew have some kind of sixth sense here on the water, but they're sailing their own race. They're not basing it on the history of what we've seen, because we were just speaking to Toby Schadewald up in the studio just now, and he really wanted the pin end of the line to be able to win the left. That's what he did to win that race, as did the Italians before him. The Swiss going round the bottom of the course now, and interestingly they are going round the left-hand mark, so they will be going to the opposite side of the course that served them so well on the previous beat. So Guillaume Giraud prepared to keep things open and always open-minded to both sides of the course. Being followed round now, big 180-degree turn by Union Yacht Club Wörthersee from Austria, skippered by Martin Dietrich.
Well, and there, just in the background, the Italian team going around that bottom gate, choosing the other gate and heading out towards that right-hand side. And they've made a nice little gain from that. So even though they really got stuck in that diamond of death, again, they crept out the other side. The breeze came good on that side. And they've escaped down that part of the racecourse. So clearly, very different opinions out there for the sailors. The tacticians making those calls of where they want to be on that racecourse. And a complete split from the teams to where they want to be going. But certainly looking at the angle of the boats coming away, I would want to be on starboard tack and not sailing much further out towards that right.
I totally agree with you. I mean, you look at the yellow and pink boats there and how much more distance the yellow boat has made out of the bottom of the course compared with the Italians in the pink boat on the right. It's a very slow exit out of the right-hand side. So I favour where these boats have gone. Société Nautique de Genève and Union Yacht Club Wörthersee. I think they are in the stronger breeze on the left-hand side. But we will see what the Italians can salvage from the right-hand side on the right of our picture right there.
Well, they made a short gain anyway from the bias being towards that right-hand gate mark. So they made a little bit of a pickup. And also Union Yacht Club, they didn't do a fantastic rounding at that bottom gate. It was all a little bit messy at that bottom gate. But getting out towards that right-hand side, we see the breeze is still sort of just with them all the way across. And it's when coming back into this middle part of that race course where the breeze is starting to head. So we'll see the breeze come good over towards that right side a little bit more. Will they get a shift? But we see as they come back towards the middle, that's when the header affects that right-hand, that starboard tack. So will we see that happen again? This is what's going to pay out. But certainly, you know, from a tactician's mind, you want to do the longest tack first. And that's exactly what Union Yacht Club Wörthersee and Société Nautique de Genève have done. But that right-hand side, still looking quite comfortable with that breeze.
Yes, and the other thing for the Italians is this race is quite spaced out. The traffic really has separated. There's quite a separation bubble between first and last. And so that's going to get the Italians out of jail to some extent on the right-hand side, just that they haven't got many other boats that close to them. Really quite spread out compared with previous races.
So watching the team on board, look at how much they're all looking around, eyes out over the back, watching over that back shoulder as Union Yacht Club Wörthersee just dialing it up a few degrees higher. A slight knockdown here, watching that tiller movement as they bear away. They're making that call. Look, you can clearly see the Italian team coming in from this right-hand side, keeping an eye on them. They're looking very close. Are they going to tack straight underneath them?
Wow, look at the difference in line. I mean, Union Yacht Club Wörthersee, I don't know if they deserve that, but I mean, the yellow boat suddenly has that yellow curve. Oh no, now it changes, and now Société Nautique de Genève tack onto starboard, and just when things were looking really good for the yellow boat, oh, maybe they're also having to dive off behind the blue boat. It looked like the Austrians were going to be able to overtake the French.
Well, it's a big gain from them anyway, from they've taken that to then having to duck behind them, because they were still a good few when they came round that leeward mark. It was definitely the advantage to the Swiss team. And again, it still is, because they get that inner line. But now it's about momentum. Are they going to be able to hold speed? Where are the Italians? Are they going to try and squeeze it in at the mark? There they are in the background. So no, there's no such problems for that. So for Société Nautique de Genève, it's all about getting this kite hoisted, getting it set. Can they creep away? Union Yacht Club Wörthersee, great set behind them as well. They sit on that slightly lower line.
So the Austrians in the yellow boat in a very good position to be able to attack for the lead, and it's going to be interesting to see who goes for the first jibe. It's going to be a hard one for the Swiss to defend, and sometimes with these asymmetric Jenicas, the boat behind can get the gust before you and get an inside line that stops the leader from jibing. So Société Nautique de Genève, yes, you'd rather be where they are, but they are going to have to be extremely clever with their defence against the Austrians, breathing down their necks. And the boat that could profit from all of this is the Italian Società Canottieri del Salo, the pink boat, who could profit from any kind of match race going on in front of them.
Well, watching the speeds as they go downwind, certainly the quickest boat is Société Nautique de Genève. They were sitting at more about just over 4 knots. They've now come down a bit more equal with the other two boats as they jibe out. You'd expect the jibe to come from them as well to protect it, but again, bold moves coming in, getting a little bit of distance. This is where it's going to be interesting. Are Union Yacht Club Wörthersee, though, going to start to find themselves in this blinkered battle, trying to protect their second place, which will allow Société Nautique de Genève to accelerate away? But we can certainly see from those speeds that breeze on that left side, but that's a great jibe coming from early on from Union Yacht Club Wörthersee. That's what they did in the previous match, and so far are in a great position here.
And these are tense moments for Société Nautique de Genève. They were leading. They're now in danger of slipping back into third place. This wouldn't be the first time we've seen this happen. And this could be the difference between them being a clear first going into qualifying and being on the cusp of maybe not even qualifying. I mean, they're doing okay, but they can't afford to slip below third place. If they can hold on to second, they should be okay to go through on qualifying. But first place, for reasons we'll explain in a few minutes from now, going through in first place is a massive advantage going into this final four format that we are going to explain. And it looked like the Swiss were going to be able to claim that top spot. Now it's extremely in doubt as Union Yacht Club Wörthersee, the yellow boat, looks like it's rolled over the top of the Swiss. And there's also a danger that the pink boat of the Italians could also do the same. So they are almost neck and neck. I would say it's the Austrians that have a marginal advantage coming down to the finish. But this is a 3-horse race right now.
It is very, very tight. Certainly the Austrians just creeping out a really nice jibe. I don't think anything. They've got a good bit of momentum. The spinnaker's set really nicely. I think they're going to be quite comfortable with holding on to this. The battle is going to be where the Swiss team, Société Nautique de Genève, are they going to be able to hold on? The breeze starting to soften on that right-hand side of the course, though. Looking very difficult with the pink boat, the Italians. That's softened now, but very, very tight as they come down towards the finish line. But it is going to go to the Austrians, Union Yacht Club Wörthersee. Very comfortable so far.
So that's great for the Austrians, but they're nowhere close to being able to make the final four. They won't even make it into the top 10 despite such a fantastic race by the Austrians. But they won't worry too much about that. That's a great way to finish off their campaign here in St. Moritz at the Sailing Champions League finals.
You see the excitement from on board is just how much each race means. And that's it. It's not about just those final races. Whether you're in it to win it or not and you're further back, they've climbed up into that sort of top 10 with that. You can see on board the Swiss a little bit calmer. They'll know that at the moment they are still in that final four. There's other boats still to race or average points to be added. The question will be exactly, will they come out on that top position with that advantage going into that final four?
Yeah, we'll bring you an update on all the scores. This is highly likely to be the final race of qualifying as the next boats come across the line. And in the end, the Italians struggled to hold on to third place. They might have just managed to do it, but the Italians were really starting to be swallowed up by the Danes and another Swiss boat, the Regatta Club Bodensee. So things really tightened up at the end for the Italians, who at one point looked like they could even threaten for the lead down that final run. So it all got very interesting in the final stages. There was no runaway winner. And Société Nautique de Genève, I wonder where they'll see their look upon that race as the missed opportunity, possibly up that second beat, when perhaps we could say that Union Club Wörthersee were a little bit lucky with that massive left-hand shift.
Yeah, there was one of those ones that when you're on lake sailing, those opportunities arrive. There's very little you can do about it, but they controlled it. They were still leading at that top mark. They were leading down that run. It was all about when that jibe came in. So because that jibe came in early, I was surprised to how delayed they went. They went that little bit further. We saw them, and I said on that video, are they going to wait a little bit longer, and they should be going? They should have jibed as soon as those other boats went. That would have kept them bow forward on them and allowed them potentially to still sneak in and take that race win. But very tough decision. But again, it's a matter of getting yourself into that final four. That's the biggest thing for them. But of course, it would be nice to go in on that top spot, having that advantage with that extra race.
Well, because we are only halfway through Flight 8 and we're not going to be able to complete all of Flight 8, there are going to have to be some manual calculations to work out who exactly has made it through based on the average points calculations for those that didn't do a race in this final flight. So it's going to be tense moments waiting to find out who's made it through. I fancy that Cercolo della Velabari is one boat, the Italians, that we can say are very likely to go through. They won that race just now in very fine style, and they're prepared to take some risks out on that race course. I feel a little bit sorry for Société Nautique de Genève. I felt like they started a pretty tactically solid race, and there wasn't much they could do to defend against that, what I think is a large chunk of luck for the yellow boat, the Austrians from Wörthersee.
No, I agree. I agree that they basically, there was very little they could do to defend that upwind section, but I felt that they could have easily jibed at the same time on that downwind leg. So a bit of a bad luck on that first sort of section, but there was no reason why they couldn't jibe and still defend their position out in front on that last downwind leg. So a little bit of on both sides, could be coming across a little bit harsh on them, but it's also with that level of saying it could easily have been slightly different for them.
So Corky, if the analysis is ready, it would be great to have a bird's eye view of how that race worked out. We were still interviewing Toby Shadowalt for when the start of that race went off, so we didn't see how the start of that race worked out. But I think it was Yacht Club Scheveningen that won the left-hand end. But we really didn't end up talking about the Dutch for very long in that race. So the pattern across the race course really changed compared with the two races that we'd been watching previously, which goes to show that coming into this final, you really can't take anything for granted. It's not just about the power of the left, which is the way that the Italians played their race.
No, and I think as we look at the analysis in this first graphic, shows straight away from where we're positioned. So before we even get into the start and play it, you can see that there is that bias towards this right-hand side. So straight away, lots of the boats all bundling up towards that side, and we did see that right-hand side suddenly play out and be a bit more favoritism. So straight away, as we come away from this start, we can see a lot of boats getting a good header off that side. And what we mean by that header is just being knocked down towards that side. So straight away, this three boats out towards the right took that first shift. Now they take that little bit of a knock again, and that's what put them in that controlling position. So actually, it was something that all of the boats could have responded to. They all got that same shift. It wasn't that there was the separation from the right side or the left that created that side of actually how boats panned out. It was a very simple, there's a header, do I take it or do I try and sail it a bit further? And it becomes into what we talk about in sailing, that little greed. Oh, it's heading a little bit. If I go a bit further, is it going to get better? Will I get a bigger lift out of it? When actually on lake sailing, they just needed to get round it. We see Société Nautique de Genève, they get round in front, and this is where everything seemed fairly comfortable with them. So we're going to just speed through a little bit more. You can see the extension downwind. Okay, the pink boat coming across, that is the Italians. They were the ones that went through the Diamond of Death, suffered it that first third, but then got good speed on that bottom section, and then took, again, looking at that gate, there was the bias towards that right-hand side, so they gained a little bit of advantage. But then this is what we talked about, up this second upwind leg for the Swiss. So they're looking comfortable over towards that left-hand side. They come back towards the middle section, nice and defensive, nice and controlled. You're doing everything you possibly can. But now watch that yellow tracer line. Look at the separation between the Swiss boat now taking that tack. You see them having to delve down. So there was very little they could do to protect against that. They've done everything they could defensively and match race-wise to defend that. So they are still in control. But then this was the game changer. So as we're watching the boats come downwind now, watch the pink boat and the yellow boat take that jibe out early. SNG should have done exactly the same time. And there we go. We don't see them taking that jibe until now. Look at the separation and how that's all panned out. Straight away, we see the Austrians take that jibe early. They take that soak down in the middle, keep bow forward. And suddenly that's what happens with asymmetric racing. So I felt the crux in that for the SNG team there. They should have taken that jibe early. They should have gone at exactly the same time as the Austrians and so on. If they had done that, they potentially had a chance of holding on to the win.
I think you're being a little bit unfair, Corky. I don't feel that they really had the opportunity to jibe. I think the moment they went round the windward mark with the yellow boat right on their tail, the yellow boat was really dictating. Now, if they'd been able to pull a little bit more distance and stay on the same line as the yellow boat, the Austrians, I think maybe they could have simo-jibed. I think if they'd have simo-jibed, they would have been swallowed up straight away. So I'm not sure that opportunity ever opened itself out to them. I sort of feel a little bit sorrier for them than you do.
I see that as basically lake sailing in that sort of sense as well, isn't it? It's that sort of the breeze shifted and we saw the left-hand side so favourable in those first two races to suddenly seeing it square up, and if not the right becoming a bit more dominant in that last race. And so, you know, the racers have done phenomenally out there. The sailors, how they're dictating those shifts, how they control them, and we're seeing some superb racing. And so, yeah, I agree. I felt, you know, how well they had controlled that. To lose that on that last leg, you know, I was hoping where they had positioned themselves on that jibe, there might have been that little bit more speed just to get bow forward on that. But, you know, that's racing, isn't it? And it's shuffled the points up. They've still, it doesn't mean that that's kneecapped them and they're out of that Final Four. The likelihood is they will still be in that Final Four. They just might not be going in on that lead spot, where they would have liked to have gone in.
Yeah, okay. Well, I mean, it didn't quite work out as they would have liked, but they are still very much in the running for this four-boat final. We're waiting to hear if there is the possibility of a third race in this flight, so that may well still happen, but as you can see on the water there's not an awful lot of wind to work with right now. While we're waiting to find out what happens, let's have a chat about this four-boat final. And one of the architects of the whole concept is someone that we work closely with at Sail Tracks. That's Marcus Bauer, former Olympian, twice been to the Olympic Games. As I say this, I hear that we are now into a start sequence, so maybe we won't have a chance to go into the four-boat final format in any detail now. So we'll come back to that in a little while. I can't wait to get into that because I think it's a fascinating format where, as we will find out, whoever wins the final race gets to win the regatta overall. How often do you get to see that? We don't get it with the medal race that often in Olympic sailing. It's a nice idea of the boat that wins the last race being able to punch their arms aloft because they won that race, which also led to them winning the championship. That's what I'm excited about.
Oh, exactly that. You don't normally see that. It's, as I say, a combination of results that have led them to that possible bit. And we see in lots of other racing, you could have won before you've even come into that last race, or there's no chance of someone being able to overtake you. So the race actually just becomes a bit of a sail around. So this is where the pressure's all going to sit on all of these guys out on the water to try and get themselves and secure them place. And, you know, just to highlight certainly one of them, Deutsche Touring Yacht Club, St. Petersburg Yacht Club, are all on the actual brink, and Pirogova, all on that sort of, just on the edge of that sort of Final Four. It is going to be very, very tight. Certainly, the weight on the shoulders of Deutsche Touring Yacht Club, that's where it's going to sit. Currently sitting in second place at the moment, but without any of the races, 1 point behind them for the other two boats. So they need to win this race to keep them in that solid top four. It's going to be very, very tight when the points all stack up. With 1 minute, 10 seconds to go, you can see the breeze very light out on that race course. We've got about 2.5 up to sort of 3 knots still, but still pretty tricky with what's out on the water. The breeze sitting in that mid-side. We've got a bit of bias towards that starboard end committee boat end. So again, up here, you can see the boats wanting to probably favour that side. But we've seen that time and time again, off that start, a little bit of a header comes in quite early. The bows go down, and then it starts to favour those boats that are over towards more that mid to port end.
So the whole fleet holding back quite a long way this time. Normally, a number of the boats in any of these 8-boat fleets have already booked their place on the start line, but coming in a lot later than normal. We were on board with Deutsche Touring Yacht Club, boat number 2, with the light blue top of the sail. That's who we're watching, because they're in second overall in the overall standings. This really matters for them, this race. They need to maintain their spot in the top 4. They got 10 seconds to go, and at the moment, those Germans on Deutsche Touring Yacht Club are the most poked out. Boat number 3, trying to get some speed up. That's Navigator Sailing Team from Russia. There goes the start, and actually the fleet was some way back off the line. The only 2 boats that were close were the pink boat from Überlingen from Germany, and the other German team, Deutsche Touring Yacht Club. So good starts for them, and that's Deutsche Touring Yacht Club that we're on board with now.
So again, we come down to the start, and actually the start, it's not so much of the end of the start line you can see, and you can see the separation already starting to happen between the boats, but it's having that momentum off that line. We talk about speed a lot of the time and hitting the line, and everyone thinks that, oh, when the gun goes, well, then suddenly the accelerator goes down, like in a 100-meter race or in a drag race. It's not that. You've got to have these boats up to speed, and that's where you're then judging where that start line is. So a good start from these lead boats, and again, sticking to coming towards this mid to left-hand side of the racecourse, but a lot more even with the 5 boats coming here. We don't see that separation. We've normally seen 1 boat or 2 just skip out in front.
And Navigator Sailing Team, they won the pin end of the line. They weren't the most poked out boat at start time, but they're starting to look really strong and starting to make life difficult for KSSS, just falling out of picture as they drop out of contention in the front end of the race course. So boat number 4 is Kungliga Svenska Segelsällskapet. So KSSS actually doing quite well further out on the other side of the course. Boat number 7 is Überlingen, just about hanging in there, but boat number 3, Navigator Sailing Team, capitalising on that good pin end start that they managed to make. Deutsche Touring Yacht Club, not quite sure what's happened to them. They've tacked out onto port, and I get the impression that they are not dictating their own terms. I feel like they are fighting for air, and there you can see it. I don't know what happened to them, because they had a pretty good start, but somehow the Germans have been spat out the back, and suddenly they are fighting to establish the kind of result that they need to keep themselves in the top 4 overall.
Well, exactly that. It looks certainly just as when we first saw the actual pictures of them going along, they didn't look like they were sailing a slightly lower angle for not a lot more extra speed. And then that breeze started to look light. And then because of that gap being created, because of not sailing a slightly higher angle, because of that side, they're then not able to tack. That gap is too big, and any tack, then there's port and starboard, rule 10. They're not going to have to be able to avoid them, and because of that, then actually the boat started to slow, and it looked like they didn't have what seemed a comfortable lane. They certainly didn't have a lot of speed off that, and as you say, they've had to peel themselves out of there, but now are in a lot of traffic and are trying to find their way back across this race course. So as we're looking at them in the middle of the race course, they have 4 boats stacked up on their hip. There they are with number 2. So that's Deutsche Touring Yacht Club. So there they are in that mid-section of the race course. But you have got all of those 4 other boats up on this top side that if the breeze stays as it is, they can put the bow down a little bit, sail a slightly lower angle but a greater speed and roll in. Also, they can gain an opportunity of room at that mark. So it could get worse for Deutsche Touring Yacht Club before it gets better.
It looks like it's going to get really busy around this windward mark, because there's an awful lot of the fleet all converging on this mark all at once, and I suspect we can see a bit of work having to be done by the umpires as they get to the first rounding. So now boat number 8, we haven't had much to say about them so far. Lord of the Sail Europe, they are first to tack on to starboard, but will boat number 4 be able to get round ahead of them? That's KSSS, Bjorn Hansen and the Royal Swedish Yacht Club, who managed to go round in first place We might have fancied them as one of the ones to go through to the final four. Well, they're not far off that. They, if they were to hold on to first place, they would just be agonising points out the top four. But they'll certainly keep on doing whatever they can, but I don't think it's going to be enough for them. Second round, St. Petersburg Yacht Club. Now, they are also in contention for getting into the top four, but only an outside bet. Deutsche Touring Yacht Club round in third. That's a bit of a get out of jail. Things aren't as bad for them as we had feared. So a third place in this race so far would just about keep them in contention for getting into the top four, but they can't afford to slip back much further than that.
Well, if they sit in third, it will sit them in fifth place, which would be very, very tight, and it would all come down to, again, Wassersport, Verein Hemmelingen, and their average points or racing from this next flight. But they are balanced and teetering right on the edge of those final four, as we see the lead boats all sticking together. A nice procession on the way down, happy with the boat speeds. You can see the gaps very small between the boats, so they'll be trying to eke out every little bit of speed. The crew all as far forward as possible, minimising drag, keeping that kite set, constant communication with the power in that kite. Is there breeze to go down? Can we soak slightly lower? So you can already see the Swedish trying to soak a little bit lower, but that boat speed starting to suffer. St. Petersburg Yacht Club in second place, the speed a little bit higher, so they are starting to close that gap. You can see that bowsprit is only millimetres off the transom of the Swedish team there. These are the lead two boats.
Both sailing extremely low. I don't suppose either of them really want to sail that low normally, because the kites are barely managing to stay filled. And in fact, St. Petersburg Yacht Club now heading up to try and keep the Jenica a little bit more filled, giving the opportunity for Bjorn Hansen and the Swedes to be able to respond. But the air in those sails is extremely light, not least for the fact that we're 1,800 metres above sea level, so the air's thin already, but not much air flowing across these sails.
When there you can see the boats both going into jibes, pressurise these lead two boats, but again, the pressure firmly on that blue spinnaker, left of picture, Deutsche Touring Yacht Club. This is the worst position they can be in to hold on to that fourth place. If they drop worse than third, that's it. They're out of the top final four. So they are right on the brink, and they will be hoping that these lead two boats, we've seen it before. Bjorn Hansen got in a little bit of a tussle with who do we see? Regatta Club Overhoffen in that other race, and they had a little bit of a tussle, and that's what slipped past. So are we going to see that match racing bit come back through again? Will we see this sort of aggression and want to close the gap on? And certainly for St. Petersburg Yacht Club, applying the pressure, that is the race, and they're hoping that there will be a battle, so Deutsche Touring Yacht Club can allow them just to fight on. But with not a gap, much of a gap behind them either, they have not got a lot of breathing space.
And no one's daring make that extra manoeuvre. It's really not that much further to sail to the other mark, but it does mean one more jibe. But the first boat to attempt that is Lord of the Sail Europe from Russia, so they will be coming around this near mark as we see in picture. And then going around almost the same time is Segeln Motorboat Club Ubelingen from Germany, following the leaders out to the right-hand side of the course. So at the moment, Deutsche Touring Yacht Club, they need to do a little bit more than they're doing. They may not know that. They may not know how close the points are. Or they'll have a sense of it, but I doubt they've got anyone on board with a calculator. They, at the moment, are biding their time. They don't have the moment to attack. So I think they're doing the right thing. They're biding their time, but really the Germans need to take back at least one place in front of them.
To give himself a little bit of more comfort, that place will be required. But exactly that. They cannot do anything silly here. They have just got to ensure those gaps stay close enough to enable them that opportunity. You don't know when it's going to come, whether there's a missed shift, whether there's a poor tack, whether there's a penalty being applied, anything on that, then that's where we could see it. Just heard a whistle and a boat with a flag being held up. Just trying to get some information on that, to whether there was a penalty or whether it was an all clear.
Well, Look how soft it is for the leaders. They've tacked onto starboard, but there's virtually no wind at all for the Swedes to play with
And it's
right
strange that, yes, they've tacked to come back towards the middle part of the course, but look at the angles again. Why would you potentially tack to come back? Certainly with those angles as they're coming across, you'd be tempted to keep on sort of driving it.
Except that in by these trees, it's always been a dangerous place to be. And if you get too far into this right-hand corner, there's a danger that you fall out of the breeze altogether. So even though the angle for the leaders is not fantastic, if it gets you out into some breeze in the middle of the course, maybe it's the price worth paying, even if the angle's not very good. But it really doesn't look great for Deutsche Touring Yacht Club at the back. On the right-hand side of that picture, they are struggling to get out of that right-hand corner of the racecourse right now.
Yeah, they have found that almighty hole, and this is the pressure firmly on. This, as we talked about, they are on the cusp of that Final Four. Every single point's going to matter to whether they can get involved or not. But also a very tight battle. St. Petersburg Yacht Club, they're still battling it out. The points won't be good enough to get into that Final Four, but they could be in that agonising fifth spot. But again, every single point matters, and you'll just be able to walk away proud from that. But the pressure firmly on Deutsche Touring Yacht Club. You can see the crews now. Their order positioning starting to change. This breeze going very soft across the course. We've literally got readings of 0.5, 1 knot, 2 knots. So again, the boats all very, very still, trying to keep that momentum on. Lord of the Sail Europe doing a nice job in the middle of, or coming out towards that left side. But again, struggling for a little bit of a breeze. There's the speeds on those boats. So no one creeping up. Just there we see Lord of Sail. That's what I was talking about. Just over 2 knots there, but just out of contention at the moment. So it looks like there is that boat, Navigator Sailing Club, coming across on that left side. If they overtake Deutsche Touring Yacht Club, that would be that extra place that they cannot afford to lose. So there's that tack from Navigator Sailing Club as they come across in front of Deutsche Touring Yacht Club. But look how tight it is at this top mark.
And it's so tight with barely no momentum for boat number 4. That's the Swedish that have been leading this race. Will they be able to get round at all? The Russians on the left-hand side carrying a little bit more pace on boat number 1. And these are really, really tense times. It's an opportunity for the boats to close up. These are the kind of moments when Deutsche Touring Yacht Club might be able to get back some kind of position in the race, because they desperately need it. But it's Lord of the Sail Europe on boat number 8 that are coming through fast on port tack, about the only boat that's got any kind of speed until now. We see the leaders go round. Navigator Sailing, also from Russia, now off and away, while the Swedes are still struggling to get that round this mark.
But look out the back, boat number 2, Deutsche Touring Yacht Club. Exactly what you said about being out towards that right-hand side, hitting that hole, struggling for breeze, and suddenly everyone coming in. But looks like a penalty's being handed out to Lord of the Sail Europe, so they are the ones spinning at that top point. But there are still a couple more boats that have squeezed past, and so this looks like it could be the final nail in the coffin. Certainly with this downwind leg, they have got an awful amount to do if they are to still try and keep this dream alive.
Oh, this must be so hard for Julian Stuckel and his crew to take right now. It perhaps was a little bit risky sailing into that right-hand corner by the trees. It certainly hasn't paid off. But they were so close to the black boat, St. Petersburg Yacht Club. They were only maybe 2 boat lengths away from the Russians, but the Russians got out of that corner just in time and are now leading this race, and the breeze has shifted round. It's making it quite a soldier's course, quite processional behind them, which is making it much easier for St. Petersburg Yacht Club to defend this lead. And so this is important also for St. Petersburg Yacht Club, who are on the cusp of being able to get into the top 4. Will it be quite good enough? We'll have to wait and see. But St. Petersburg Yacht Club doing all they can to try and book their spot in the final 4. Behind them, the Swedes, KSSS. We're on board with Bjorn Hansen now and his crew in second place, looking over his shoulder, just keeping an eye on the other boats and also any kind of breeze advantage that's coming down the race course. KSSS also, like St. Petersburg Yacht Club, just on the outside of the top four. It's probably not going to be enough for this boat, for the Russians or for the Swedes in second place to get through. But all you can do is do the best you can with what you're presented. The St. Petersburg Yacht Club, hosts of the second semi-final just a month ago when it was super windy, when these J70s were racing in gusts of up to 30 knots, now drifting across the finish line with the Russians about to take the winner's gun, but doing barely more than 3 knots of boat speed. Such a slow race, but so much tension in this race. The Russians staying still till the very last, until they know that they've got that boat safely across the finish line. And they high-five. Nice way to finish the regatta. And I wonder how close they know they are to that top four. They've won their last 2 races on the water, so they've really come on strong. But has it been too little too late for the Russians? Meanwhile, behind them, the light blue boat on the tracer is the Swedes coming across the finish line. Also, just on the outside of the top 4, Bjorn Hansen will be disappointed if he doesn't make it through to the top 4, because he's certainly one of the most rated professional sailors here amongst the 31 teams. Now coming across the line, the other Russian team that was leading for some of this race, they got such a great start off the pin end. Fast charging behind them, Segel Motorboat Club Uberlingen, but it looks like the Russians have held on for 3rd place across the line, ahead of the Germans in 4th place. But not the Germans we've been talking about for most of this race. Where are the Germans that matter? The Germans that needed to get a top 3 place in this race. They're still to finish, and they're so far back behind the rest of the fleet. It looks like it's curtains for Deutsche Touring Yacht Club. A 5th in the previous race, a 6th in this race, and they've really caved in the final stages of this competition. They won 2 races earlier on in previous days, but they just haven't been able to maintain that kind of form in this race. We're looking at Lord of the Sail Europe from Russia coming across the finish line. And that's Lord of the Sail Europe over, completing their last race. And that's Deutsche Touring Yacht Club coming across in 6th place, and that simply won't be good enough. They were well inside the top 4, and now with that 6th place, that will tumble them out of the top 4. Desperate disappointment for the Germans. And that was a great show of sportsmanship, applauding the race officer as they cross the finish line. Even though they'll be disappointed with their own performance, they at least find the time to say thank you to the race officer Philip and his crew, who are out there in the pouring rain making these races happen. And we've had confirmation that this will be the final qualifying race, so we're still 1 race short of completing Flight 8, which is why we need to apply average points to some of the boats. And there you can see the look of desperation on their faces. Monica Linda with her hands over her head, just frustrated that they haven't managed to finish off this regatta in the way that they'd hoped. Monica Linda looking the most frustrated in that picture. Julian Stuckel, bit harder to tell how he's feeling, but surely a sense of disappointment for them.
We can see the Baumann very, very sort of frustrated, you know, even just comprehending what sort of just happened, trying to take it in a little bit. Where did it all go wrong? And that's something we'll look at shortly. But it's a really tough time for any sailor that you've been battling it out for, a number of races. You competed in 8 races across 8 flights, or in there you've done 8 races as well. And it's, mind-numbingly sort of painful to know that sort of, that final race, that final couple of legs, and that's where it all came off. And that's why, I was applauding earlier sort of the strength and resilience of some of those top guys to go out knowing that these are the final races. One duff race could see that top 4 change, and unfortunately that is what happened to Deutsche Touring Yacht Club. And it's of course, you feel very sympathetic about it, but then also you've got to celebrate and be pleased with the other sailors that have made it into that top 4. They've all been battling it out on the same race course through the same days, and we have our top 4.
Yeah, I mean, it would have been nice to have more flights for there to be more clear separation between the top few teams. That hasn't been the case because the wind really hasn't played very fair for the last few days. The first day was absolutely fantastic and almost looks like a different place when you're under blue sky and the wind is blowing. But the rain, unfortunately, has been a bit of a feature over the last few days. Let's have a look back at the race that we've just seen, which we've now heard will be the final race of qualifying.
Well, we're going to jump to pretty much exactly that crux in that race course for Deutsche Touring Yacht Club, which, as we see here, is that on that right-hand side. We saw the lead 3 boat head towards that right-hand side. There we know that the breeze goes light under those trees. Andy, you highlighted that perfectly. And but again, they had to take that clear line. You can see those adjustments from the boat looking for a clear lane. But then this is where the breeze came in from that left-hand side. It all started to favour the boats on the left. The boats in the middle also just coming back across, not committing themselves to that right-hand side. The last thing they want to do is put themselves further across towards that right-hand side. So we can see those lead boats now starting to come up towards that windward mark. And this is where the wheels really fell off on this. So we saw Deutsche Touring Yacht Club over towards the right side, and labelled there. A crossing in front of them was Navigator Sailing Team. They also made the gain. But then we also see the pink boat of Segel and Motorboot Club, Ubelingen, they squeeze in as well. And also the Swedish team all cramming in at that mark. And that's where it all suddenly became disastrous for them. The breeze very, very light. Any momentum, the boats carried on in the inside. And straight away, 3 boats zip past sort of Deutsche Touring Yacht Club. Very difficult to deal with. And a tough place. They managed to get back round. Lord of Sail Europe did its penalty turn at them, sat alongside them, but we already highlighted they needed to finish 3rd or better for them to stay in that top 4. And as you can see from there, they're back battling it out for 5th or 6th, and they did end up finishing in 6th place at that finish line. So a hard pill to swallow for that team. Again, this is what's great about the analytics. It's easy for us to sit up here in our lovely cube, one nice and warm and dry, but also actually being able to analyse and gain all the data from the SAP Sailing Analytics. And I'm sure it'll be something they'll go back and do, but it's a painful thing to go back and look at exactly what went wrong in your race.
Well, Corky, we've been talking an awful lot about that top 4 and the cut-off to make the finals. It's the moment of truth. Let's have a look at the overall leaderboard with those average points. So, at the top, Société Nautique de Genève. We worried about them earlier in the day. Well, we needn't have done. They're top on 20 points. Circolo della Vela Bari, well, they didn't manage to do their final race in the Flight 8, but it doesn't matter because average points puts them in 2nd overall, just 0.29 of a point ahead of Norddeutsche Regatta Verein. We had Toby Schadewald up in the studio earlier, winner of his last race in qualifying. He will be so happy to be through in 3rd place, while another German team, Wassersport Verein Hemelingen, are through on 22.86 points. Again, an average points qualifier, and look who hasn't quite made it. Winner of their last 2 races, really coming on strong, and you've got to feel for St. Petersburg Yacht Club. Would they have been able to maintain that winning form that the Russians were finding in the latter stages of this competition? And Deutsche Touring Yacht Club, we spoke an awful lot about them in the race just now. Look at their last 2 scores, 5th, and then in that race that we saw just then as 6th place. And now those were the 2 nails in their coffin. Just a 3rd place would have got them through into the final, but it wasn't enough. And then Kungliga Spencer Segelsällskap at KSSS from Sweden in 2nd place. Pretty good. but not good enough for them. And the Danes, the all-female team, beating most of the male teams, but not quite good enough to get through to the final four. I'm so looking forward to this format. It's going to be Switzerland versus Italy versus Germany versus Germany. So Germans have half of the final to themselves, and we are going to be speaking to the German architect of this Final Four format. And I'm glad to have Markus Bauer sitting next to me to explain this format to us. Markus, what is this Frankenstein's monster that you've created?
I don't think it's a monster. I think it's super simple. The idea is that we actually have the top boats sailing against each other in the end, and we want the winner of the last race to be the winner of the regatta.
So how does that work?
But obviously, you know, we sailed for 3 days now, and we want that to matter as well. So we take the top 4 boats, and they come in with the qualifying results, if you like, first, second, third, fourth. So the Swiss have a first place. And now we race until one boat has won 2 races or scored 2 wins, but one boat already has 1 win. So it's kind of like tennis, in a game of tennis where you have to win 2 sets and then you win the match. And one team now already has match point, the Swiss.
That's the Swiss.
If they win the first race, the regatta is over and they would win the regatta. If they don't, we carry on. We have another set. And all the other boats are ranked by low point scoring like they always are in sailing. And the qualifying result would break the tie. So it's pretty simple, and it's really exciting because any race can be the deciding race.
So what's the most number of races that we could have?
Well, you could have 4, because after 3 races, you could have the boats that came in second, third, fourth all have 1 win. So everybody has 1 win, and then it's down to the 4th race, to the last race. I don't think that's going to happen so often in this format, but if it does, obviously, that's super exciting. The first time we did it in Travemünde a few weeks ago in the Youth Sailing Champions League, we had 2 races, and they were both really, really exciting to follow.
Okay, so who won on that occasion? Was it the winner of qualifying, or was it the winner of 2 races in the final?
The winner of qualifying eventually came second, and the winner came in third from the qualifying, and they won the first 2 races. But the winner of the qualifying was leading both races, so he had match point, and he could have done it both times, but he made some mistakes, and in the end, they didn't win. And what I find really interesting about the scoreboard right now is that the boats are actually less than 1 point apart. So people always argue, oh, you know, when we come in the final, we've sailed for so long, and then the point gaps all get reduced. Well, actually, what we do now is we extend them a little bit because they're less than 1. So now it's 1 point, 2 points, 3 points, 4 points. So it's totally fair, and it's going to be a super exciting final.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how this plays out. Do you think the teams on board now are having a discussion about how tactics might change from an 8-boat race to a 4-boat race? And also the fact that those 3 boats, the Italians and the 2 Germans, can't afford to let the Swiss win the first race. Are the Swiss going to be marked because they've already won qualifying?
Well, yeah, maybe they have a little bit of a disadvantage. Obviously, there's 3 boats that really don't want them to make anything out of their match point, but they have to sail their own race as well. If they want to win, they got to win the race. I talked to Julian Stöckel last night about the strategy. What a pity that they just didn't make the cut in that last race, but he was thinking, well, you know, if this would be the Olympics, it's not only about the win. You know, you might want to win silver. Silver might be worth a lot to you. You could go in with a conservative approach and sail for the points. But if you want to win, you got to be aggressive. You got to win. Otherwise, you don't have a chance of winning, obviously.
So now, is it a matter of rolling the dice a little bit harder? When you see a shift on one side or a piece of wind on one side of the course, do you go for it and just hope that the wind gods are going to blow in your favour?
I think you can't sail too conservatively. You got to sail a little bit on the aggressive side. But if you overdo it, you also fall out the backside. You got to be a smart sailor. You got to be faster. The team has to be super composed. There's going to be a lot of pressure and tension on the race course. So let's pray that the wind is is not gonna die, and then we get the final in the next hour. I'm really excited.
As the architect of this new format, how much pressure are you feeling, Marcus Bauer?
None at all. I just think it's a good system. I hope it's going to spread. I hope the sailors like it, and it's a better way to portray sailing, in my opinion.
Okay, so it'd be interesting to know if any Olympic sailors are watching this, because maybe this could be some kind of future format for Olympic racing as well, an alternative to the medal race.
I hope so. I hope if the sailors like it and the coaches like it, I hope it's going to take off. They don't like if you scrap away what has happened before and if you start with a clean slate in the final, and I sympathize with that. I think that's a bad thing. But here we have a lot of weight on the qualification. It gives one team who sailed really well match point already, and it breaks the tie. The qualification breaks the tie. So there's a lot of weight on the qualification, and I think it's a very fair system.
It's also that something that you touched on, Andy, is that when the boat wins that final race, they win as well. So you get the raw emotion at that point when we've seen time and time again races finish and they can finish 5th, 6th or 7th and they're still won, but it's not been that win of the race. So I think it brings a lot more of a...
It's definitely a different emotion, and we saw that in Travemünde. Matter of fact, the winners jumped overboard and swam to the interview boat, and they were super, super happy. It releases a different kind of emotion that was lost in our classical system, where it kind of gets more and more clear who's going to win towards the end.
Yeah, jumping overboard when you come 10th in a medal race, it looks a bit lame, doesn't it?
It does, yes.
Yeah. Anyway, Marcus Bauer, thank you for coming up with this idea. We will see how it works out. From a commentary point of view, it's much more exciting to be able to talk that boat across the finish line and know whoever takes the winner's gun is going to win the Sailing Champions League final, which is something we're going to get into pretty soon. The wind is not exactly giving its best, as you can see by the limp flags next to our commentary booth. And out there on the water, we got 4 boats waiting to get going. And we're 2:15, so we would have hoped to have got underway already, but we're just sitting under postponement, waiting to get into this 4-boat final. So, yeah, 4 boats remaining in it now. The Swiss on that match point, a really critical advantage for them. And we had our doubts as to whether the Genevan team had done enough earlier this morning. Well, it was enough. And the Italians on 2nd place, and then the 2 Germans in 3rd and 4th. We will get back to you in a few minutes once we know more about when the racing is getting underway. We can't wait for that to happen. Join us then.
This is St. Moritz. This is the Sailing Champions League. This is the final 2018. High-class sailors, short races, identical boats, thrills guaranteed. Who will be the best sail club in Europe? The answer, now.
"31 go down to 4. It's just 4 teams remaining in the battle to see who will become best sailing club of Europe. At the top of the board, Société Nautique de Genève, then Circolo della Vela Bari from Italy, and then 2 German teams, Norddeutscher Regatta Verein and Wassersportverein Hemmelingen. Now, we just hear the signal go for the first race of the 4-boat final, and if you've been listening earlier, you'll know that effectively by winning the qualifying, the Swiss team of Société Nautique de Genève effectively have already won the first race. So Corky, the other 3 boats will surely be keeping an eye on the Swiss, because they cannot afford to let the Swiss win this next race. If they do that, what are the consequences?
Well, no, that's exactly it. The Swiss, if they win this race, then that's all done and dusted, and they'll be crowned champions. So the other teams have got to win this race for it to go into another race afterwards. So by winning the next race, it will open up another opportunity for a race in another championship. So it is very, very tight. The square line going on, so it means there's no real favouritism to either of the ends of the start line. So by doing that, it creates even more opportunity for these boats to be able to attack each other rather than at one sole end. So they'll all be looking to try and get off this start line. We've seen it time and time again across the bigger fleet stuff with the other 7, 8 boats. We need them clear off that line. The breeze is still light, so it's all going to come down to minimising drag, keeping momentum going on. But these 4 teams have battled it out amazingly across the qualifications, and now it's all come down to this race.
Quite surprised to see Hemmelingen number 1 in picture that far away from the line in so little wind. I think they're going to get back in plenty of time, but there are times when the breeze drops to nothing, so that was quite a distance they were sailing from the line. We're on board now with Hemmelingen, one of 2 German teams still in this fight, but it's the Swiss with that advantage of having effectively already won a race by having won qualifying, just won the qualifying series over the last 4 days. 50 seconds to go to the start, and it's going to be a nice wide open start line, lots of room for each of these 4 boats to get a decent start, but who will want which end of the line? We're on board with SNG, the current leaders from Switzerland, skippered by Guillaume Giraud.
Very, very tight. You can see NRV tucking in under CVB. They're very tight down towards this pin end. So the Italians just tucking out onto port there, and the pink sails heading towards the more committee boat end. They'll bear away, then be looking to spin that boat on the spot and looking to build pace. So straight away here we can see the Swiss just going into attack, trying to get towards that favoured end, but it's all about boat speed here. So very, very tricky in keeping the momentum going. Look at the boats attacking that line. Looked early, a very, very close call from the German team. There, as the gun goes.
That was extremely close. Was anyone over? I mean, that number 1 boat, WVH Hemmelingen, closest to picture, nearly had a great start, but they had to scrub off the speed right at the end. And meanwhile, boat number 6, NRV, starting on port tack. That's the other German boat, Norddeutscher Regatta Verein. We're on board with Hemmelingen right now.
I would have said it looked very close as well for Société Nautique de Genève, but again, no flag, so that means they are often racing a split as 2 boats track out towards the right-hand side. And we can see by the map here, we can see the decisions are very neutral across all boats. We can see on Société de Vela Bari heading out towards that right-hand side, struggling a little bit on their angle and also pace. A great start for Norddeutscher Regatta Verein. They've come out in a very strong position.
We're on board with the Swiss, who have now tacked onto port. But yes, a reasonable start for them. Very weak start for the Italians on the right of picture, pink number 7. They had an awful lot to do in the final 20 seconds before the start, and they just didn't have their boat up to speed. Norddeutscher Regatta Verein, they went for the port tack start. They weren't trying to win the start. But they certainly had good speed on, and it seems like Tobias Schadewald, maybe learning from his experience steering the 49er in the Olympics, realizes that sometimes you can get a decent port tack start at speed behind the boats on starboard, because that's a common tactic in skiff racing. Now we see what Tobias Schadewald in the red boat on the right-hand side NRV can do as they cross. And it looks to me, Corky, in the early stages, especially as we see them lift up there on starboard tack, that they seem to hold a marginal lead.
They do at the moment, and you can see just ducking behind them is Société Nautique de Genève. They just take that little bit of a duck there. It wasn't much, though. It was a nice small movement on the mantilla, so very, very tight between these lead boats. Again, they're playing that middle part of the course. They've separated off that start line. They've got that momentum, the speed back up, but now keeping themselves in that middle part of the course, allowing them to access the left side or the right. But we have seen in this mid part of the course, it goes slightly lighter. We have seen on that hard right-hand side as well, there is that hole. So you do not want to be heading too far out towards that right-hand side. Attack there from Norddeutscher Regatta Verein as they take their covering tack back across the fleet. Gone on top of the other German boat, just out of picture, and also tracking back across to see whether they pitch up against the Swiss as they go for attack onto starboard now.
So will it be enough for the red boat for the Germans to cross in front of the Swiss? Yes, it will, by what looks like a fairly comfortable margin from this camera angle. So a bit of a gain there. It's not showing so much on the tracking, though, so maybe the camera angle was a little bit misleading, but it should be Germany holding a marginal lead just ahead of the Swiss, who they absolutely must stop from winning this race, because if the Swiss in the blue number 3 win this race, then that's done and dusted. The Swiss have won this regatta. Good hoist by the Swiss, followed round by number 1 boat, that's the other Germans, WVH Heimelingen, and then coming up last, Circolo della Vela Bari. Awful start for the Italians, and with an awful lot of work to do if Simone Ferraresi is going to catch up the other 3 teams in this race.
Well, again, a bit of something that to think about as well for those back 2 boats is that at least if Norddeutscher Regatta Verein win this race, it still leads on to more races. So it does give them that opportunity of possibly going out. They have to win those races, but it does give them another opportunity. If we see the Swiss squeeze past the Germans and for that front spot, and look how the speed closing down, the gap closing down. We see the Swiss trying to get that inside line. Look at that bowsprit now, just millimeters off the transom of the red boat there, trying to hold their position and stop them from jibing, force them into a different controlled position. Well, this would be the overtaking maneuver. If the Swiss can get in front and hold out in front, then this would secure them that. They come down towards the gate marks. You can see the teams looking to go into their jibes now.
And it looks like the Germans were driving later than they wanted to, so this is possibly an overtaking move by the Swiss in the middle of picture right now.
Big aggressive head up from Tobias there to try and force the gap and create a bit more space. And look what's also happened as well. The battle commencing between those lead 2 boats. And the third boat, the German boat, taking the other mark and heading out towards the other side. So we've seen this happen again. 2 boats getting too blinkered on themselves, forgetting the third boat. And now they've been caught back up again. So the only boat that really needs to play catch-up is the Italians. But this race is still anybody's to be taken.
And what's going to be difficult for the Swiss now is whichever side of the course they choose as they tack onto port tack, they've got an enemy on either side of the course. So you've got a German boat defending the left side of the course, you've got a German boat defending the right-hand side of the course, and they will do whatever they can to keep Swiss boat number 3 behind them. And all the while, the Italians still playing catch-up. They did an early jibe set down that run. It was a sign of desperation. But if anything is going to get the Italians back into this race, is that no one's got a clear lead right now.
And you can see the course all skewed up on either side of the racecourse. Boats heading towards the left, boats heading towards the right. And you can see that midsection again for the Swiss team. That breeze looking a little bit light. You can see the angles changes. And so when the breeze goes lighter, having that bit of a risky commitment, no, but going towards one of the sides, it enables that boat to build up that momentum, build up to that speed, and also minimise the amount of manoeuvres. And that's exactly what both of those German boats are doing. But it is a risk here. Norddeutsche Regatta Verein here with Tobias Schadewald. He is coming over towards this left-hand side. And if you look at that image, the breeze looks light across the course. But look how mirror flat it looks on this inside.
Yeah, really, really tense moments, and luck is going to come into play if the breeze stays this low. Norddeutsche Regatta Verein putting all their chips on the left-hand corner of the racecourse here. The boat number 6 with the red just about to go into attack because they're probably almost over ley line. But I wonder almost, do you gain speed from the manoeuvre? They're going so slowly in a straight line. Do you actually gain speed from making the tack?
Well, with that little bit of a roll, it is something that, again, going into dinghy racing with Rule 42, the amount of tacks you're able to do back-to-back because it can generate that propulsion. But certainly within these boats, you'll get a little bit of a kick out of it. But you can see how flat the water is over in that midsection. And certainly looks like Tobias Schadewald on this left-hand side has sniffed out some nice bit of breeze here. He's got a bit of momentum, but certainly for the Swiss there in the middle of the course, as I was worried about, that sort of bit shutting down and actually not just heading out towards one of the sides has seen them really struggle, and this is certainly going away from them. Again, this doesn't mean it's over, but it means that someone else comes away with a race win and the battle still continues.
As you talk about the potential, we see a massive change in angle, and we see the two German boats almost pointing bow to bow. But is that the Germans going into attack? It could be that the Germans have been forced to tap back again.
Yeah, this is them just going for a bit of a double tack there, so looking to come up on the mark. So again, using a bit of that sort of propulsion, but also favouring this side. So they're right next to the mark now and have a comfortable lead. Look, so you can see a good 35 metres. But that's over the Italian boat. That's up on this side with them as well. So they are trying to close the gap, but it's still very, very tight. But at the moment, this is your lead boat. Look how light it is. The sails all sitting and into the middle of the boat, forcing that sail back out to the side. Weight to leeward, trying to get that spinnaker to work. Get it out, get them breeze into it. But look how light it is on this side by the mark. Tobias Schadewald, look at the aggression going into that tiller to try and get a jibe through.
He hardly knows where the wind's coming from, and nor do I. I mean, he's decided that they're going to go on to Port Jibe, but the Jenica hardly knows where the wind is coming from. Very difficult to set that Kraftwerk Jenica. At least they've got a bit of breathing space and an opportunity to sort themselves out, but the gap is really closing up.
But looking at the angle of these boats as they're coming round this mark, it still looks like they're coming more upwind to this mark, and so does the actual spinnakers, potentially costing them the issue because it's creating drag, it's creating that confusion of where that breeze is coming from. Actually losing the spinnaker could be a better option. So there we see them still struggling in that situation. They've gone for a jibe, this breeze is completely shut down, and this would have been a better shout. And look who it is though, it is the Swiss team. If they get this race win, this will crown them champions. So this is where the pressure's now on, that breeze starting to fill in, but that breeze completely shut down for Tobias Schadewald as he took that jibe. Now the pressure on, hoping that that breeze will come down and filter on that side of the racecourse for him.
And finally, the Germans in the red boat on the right-hand side of picture starting to get moving, but they had such a big lead that's been whittled away to absolutely nothing. So now we're in a three-horse race. The other Germans from Hemelingen going into a jibe, allowing Société Nautique de Genève, who we're with now, to continue on starboard jibe. So the two Germans sailing away from the current event leader. This is potentially going to let the Swiss off the hook.
Well, this is a really difficult decision. Both German boats have taken out towards the other side. They're in that hunt for breeze. They could access that breeze on that right-hand side and suddenly make a gain. And look at the angles coming down towards that gain. But again, for the Swiss, it's about that momentum, trying to keep that boat moving. We've seen coming over towards this shore side, that little bit of pressure that sits on this corner, right as you can see them heading towards it. But the angle from those two German boats coming down, much better angle. But will we see that breeze filter in that left side or the right? This is where it's really tense. That breeze, look at the spinnaker up there in the background on the red boat. That's Norddeutsche Regatta Verein. The breeze shut down again. Momentum still here with the Swiss. But again, Hemmerlingen just hanging on to a little bit, but they're now dropping into that middle section again. Look at that mirror section in that middle of the course. I would probably be keeping myself to one side of the race course and not going anywhere near that middle part of the course at the moment.
It looks horrible for the two German teams, and Norddeutsche Regatta Verein, they're in danger of falling into maybe even last place. Who knows? Although the Italians have jibed early. It looks like Société Nautique de Genève are in a position where they may not even need to jibe for the finish line, which will be a huge advantage if they don't have to go into any more manoeuvres. So potentially by Hemmerlingen jibing off where they did, and now look how horrible the black boat looks on the left-hand side. They've let the Swiss off the hook. The Germans had them. They were controlling them, but they decided to go for what they obviously thought was better breeze in the middle of the course. Now the two Germans and the Italian will be looking at the collapsing Jenica on board the Swiss boat and just hoping that now the luck is beginning to tell against the Swiss. But they are so close to that finish line, and the Germans really need to find a gust or something, because otherwise Société Nautique de Genève are going to win the first race of the Final Four series, and by being winners of the qualifying series, this would hand the whole regatta to the Swiss. So could it all be done and dusted in the next minute or so?
It'll be interesting on the time as well with this race, to where we are at with the amount of time that's already been taken. They are still probably about 150, 200 meters off that finish line, and with the breeze all shutting down, the kite collapsing, now a little bit of breeze starting to filter in, the Italians starting to creep their way back into this. But again, the question is, kite down, kite up. Is it actually causing more hindrance? Is it actually still being a drag? Certainly now we look up on that top left-hand picture, the red boat, that is Norddeutsche Regatta Verein. They have a little bit of breeze. That kite just starting to breathe. Now look at the boat accelerate. They'll start to appear in front of that pink spinnaker. They have got some breeze. This is not over. Look at the Swiss. They are parked. The handbrake is on at the moment. The kite's backed against the sails. They are just watching that breeze, waiting for it to come in. Now the Italians start to get it. They start to go forward. Now we're waiting for Hemmerlingen to get that breeze as well. Is this going to filter in quick enough for the Swiss to still maintain this, or are we going to see the boats roll round the outside? Now the breeze is coming in. This is all going to be a matter of whether this breeze gets to the Swiss team in time.
Surely the Italians, who are now the fastest boat on the water, aren't going to win this race. That surely wouldn't be justice if Italy were to win this race. But anything can happen right now. I just wouldn't want to put any money on any of these four boats. The Swiss are still geographically closer to the finish line, but they're going about a third of the speed of the other boats, and they are in danger of being sailed right round the outside as the Swiss are still stopped dead, while the pink spinnaker of the Italians is just, well, at least it's filling. That's more than you can say for the Swiss.
What a cruel game this is. You know, you get that little sense of hope, you accelerate forward, and there it is, and then suddenly it shuts down again. This is by no means over. They have got that momentum. They have gone round the outside, but there's no reason that breeze won't just shut down. The breeze starting to fill into the Swiss spinnaker as well. Look at that ease on the sheet. Now that kite goes forward. Will there be enough drag and momentum down? The other boats now bundling together, a twist in the Italian spinnaker. Now it pops out. Not a great jibe, but you're going to see Hemmerlingen going for a jibe at the same time, and traffic's going to build up here for the Deutsche Regatta Verein as they come in behind as well. So it is still advantage for the Swiss at the moment. They're away from anybody else. The angle is better coming in on that starboard jibe, so we could still see that pink or that black spinnaker crossing that line before the Swiss team.
And the benefit for them is that they are on their final approach. The black and the pink of Germany and Italy don't need to do any more manoeuvres. The Swiss are going to need to jibe, and they're also on port jibe. So the Swiss have a lot to do if they're going to win this race. And could this really be Italy coming through for the win?
This couldn't get any closer if it tried. As this first race, you can see how light it is. All looking for just any bit of momentum, any little bit of breeze. Trying to soak down, minimise that distance, the advantage to there. Here comes the big roll jibe for the Swiss. Can they get a good pump out of it to accelerate the boat forward? Hemmelingen going forward with their spinnaker. They look like they're going to cross the line. They've got a good bit of momentum. The jibe coming in early from the Italians.
And it looks to my eye like the pink spinnaker of the Italians has taken that race just ahead of Hemmelingen. And Norddeutsche Regattaverein coming across for third. And the Swiss that were leading just 2 or 3 minutes ago, well, that hourglass in their spinnaker sort of says it all. It just all went wrong for the Swiss at the end. And they are fourth. And I thought we were going to be seeing the end of the regatta right there just a minute ago, Corky. But no, they live to fight another day. The Italians, can you believe it, won that race.
Wow, that was very, very tight on that. That was amazing to see all 4 boats collapse right down in on that finish line.
I've got to say, if the luck is going to even itself out, then Italy have used up all their luck in that race right there.
Oh.
I can't honestly say that Simone and Ferrarese and his crew deserve to win that. Not with the start they made. I think even Simone, well, he's been very gracious about talking about luck before. I think he would attribute most of that race win to luck.
Well, that, as I say, they were sunk on that first beat. You know, a bad start, playing catch-up, and they were already trying to play catch-up. It was very, very difficult. And then we saw them just creep down in that middle, but it does show that you never, ever give up. You sat there pushing all the way to that line, and you could see that bowsprit just coming through. That was very tight with all those bowsprits just separating the boats, and all the crews looking at each other. They were eyeballing each other. Who was going to get that win? Who crossed it? We believe it to be the Italian team of Circolo della Vella Bari. We are waiting for that complete confirmation. You could see someone leaning down and looking down that line, trying to identify it. Of course, Hemmelingen came in with speed at that last point, so very, very tight. So these are our provisional sort of guesses of what we're seeing, and we're waiting for complete confirmation on that, and also news of further racing. But, you know, that breeze didn't help anyone, full stop. But how exciting was that racing as a final race, to watch that in that breeze unfold, to watch people go from last to first, to moving around. Suddenly there was breeze, suddenly there was the kites shut down. It was very, very difficult. So this is, I believe we're going to have some provisional results, but we're still waiting for complete confirmation.
So, look, the Italians, they come from dead last and they win that race. How they managed to do that, I don't know. But that, you see F1 on the right-hand side, and the Sigma on the right-hand side is the points. So 2 and 1, they have 3 points. Société Nautique de Genève so nearly closed out the regatta right there and then, but they finished last in 4th place. They're on 5 points, puts them in 2nd. And the 2 German teams on equal 3rd with 6 points apiece. So there's not an awful lot of wind out there. We don't need to tell you that. But oh, we have an interview. So let's hear what Tim Kruse has to say with the Italians. So I have to say, looking quite happy.
They're looking quite happy. Guys, you won! You won the Champions League! Congratulations!
Thank you. Amazing.
This was not good sailing.
No, this was definitely the worst sailing we've been doing in the whole week. But better lucky than strong.
Yeah, you know, your start was so messed up, and then you were last back there. And it looked like the Swiss were winning, and then all of a sudden, the wind died, and you had the wind. I don't know where it came from. It was like this little angle coming, and then you had it.
Yeah, last down in the top mark, I said to the guys that we can still win this race. It's so tricky. And we didn't leave any centimeter in the last downwind. Tried to get every single half a knot in every path. And yeah, these guys did amazing. I mean, I'm super happy for my club. It's the best club in Europe for this year, so we are amazed.
Yeah, I bet all of Italy is watching. As you didn't perform in the World Cup in football, so now finally the Champions League goes to Italy. That's very good. Guys, how was it out there? Did you believe into it until the end?
No. On the upwind mark, not, but we don't lose nothing, and we create the speed with no wind.
Yeah, you were probably just hoping that maybe Hemelingen beats Swiss, so you still have a chance in the second race, right? Or did you know that this is going to be the last one?
Actually, exactly in the top mark, we didn't think so much. We just thought, yeah, we are last, but there is a pit stop, and when there is a pit stop in these conditions, means that the last can be easily first. I think we've been sailing really well the whole week, and
except of one race.
Except one race, that was this one actually. But yeah, I think luck comes and go, and we also did the last for bad luck. Maybe the luck give us back what took from us.
Yeah, exactly. Simone, such great sailing, guys. It was wonderful watching you. This was the craziest thing I've seen so far. So congratulations. You totally deserved winning the Champions League 2018. Congratulations, guys.
Thank you. Thank you.
Back to you.
Thanks very much, Tim, and congratulations to the Italians winning that race, and as it turns out, the final race, and therefore the concluding race of the Sailing Champions League finals, making Circolo della Vela Bari the best sailing club in Europe, and I would say, Corky, also the luckiest.
Yeah, as you said, I don't know how much more they could cash in, really, throughout this week. It's we saw them with that disastrous race yesterday, and what looked like the wheels had fallen off. But we've always said cool, calm, calculated, gone back out, raced with exactly that, never giving up. And you know, as we heard from them on there, just going up that last upwind leg, they foresaw it to all be over, and then with the breeze, you never give up. And that's the thing with sailing, the breeze can do anything, and it shut down, and suddenly it looked like that they were being punished, and Tobias Shadoval looked like he had suddenly, that was it, all over. You know, he had sailed such a great race, and then there, you found a hole of no wind, and suddenly the Swiss were back into it, and then Hemelingen came through in the middle. It was just absolutely fantastic racing, but it also shows how tricky it is and the conditions that were out there, and what the sailors had to face.
Well, we really didn't know the outcome of that race until maybe the final 5 metres across the finish line. Corky, just talk us back through the start and the race as it progressed.
Well, I say, where do we start, really? So, skipping past the start a little bit and jumping into that second upwind leg, because this is how it all started to pan out. So, straight away, we've got the lead boat. So, up on that top left-hand side was Norddeutsche Regatta Verein. They were leading. Look at the comfortable lead they had. Then we saw that breeze starting to become fickle at that top point. Hemelingen coming in from that right-hand side, and it closed up a little bit. But we saw them still lead comfortably round that mark. That's where that kite suddenly didn't set. Look at the difference that the Italians have taken. Gone way past any sort of ley line, trying to come back in with any sort of breeze. But as we would have thought, out of contention, way out of the back, but suddenly that breeze all started to shut down. Now suddenly Tobias, we saw him going for that jibe, trying to get Norddeutsche Regatta Verein out towards that right-hand side. The Swiss did a fantastic job sailing out towards that side, but look at the angles suddenly change. As the boats come down, you see Hemelingen coming down, and they look in a great spot with the angle of the breeze. But then the breeze started to filter out on Norddeutsche Regatta Verein. That breeze shut down. Then it started to affect. Now watch the Italians. They just hold that little bit of breeze coming through. They get into that midsection and the breeze starts to stop again. But when it starts to filter back in, they picked up a little bit of pace along with Hemelingen just below them. And look at the angles. Now this is where it suddenly creeps down, going right down to that ley line. This is where the opportunity became. But let's focus on the Swiss there. They are still parked, waiting for that breeze to come. And there was nothing they could do. It was just a complete waiting game. So right alongside, here come the 3 boats tight in along by that committee boat. The Italians have that little bit of bow forward, and we saw them risk another jibe that was going to be slightly slower, but it caught the shorter distance and put that bowsprit across. So an amazing tight race as all boats finish alongside each other. But The sense of the wind, the sense of everything else on the water, a huge amount of luck, a huge amount of bit of just waiting for that breeze. And the breeze filtered out across the whole course, and it was just going to be a matter of where that breeze filtered in. And unfortunately, it wasn't on that left side for the Swiss. It came in on that right-hand side, and it filtered through. And the Italians were able to use it most. But yeah, quite an amazing way to finish off this regatta, but it has sort of summed it up a little bit as well.
Yeah, you've had to ride your luck, and certainly that's what the Italians did, and Simone Ferrarese fully held his hands up to that. He also said maybe that the luck paid us back today from previous days. They had been a little bit unfortunate during one of the qualifying races. So a phenomenal way to wrap up a regatta that started with 31 teams from 12 nations, already representing the cream of the very best clubs in Europe, because there's been a long qualification process through Porto and through St. Petersburg for the final 31 teams to get here. It boiled down to 4, and in the end it boiled down to that one race, and Circolo della Velabari, skippered by Simone Ferrarese, along with Valerio Galati, Corrado Capecci, Minutolo, and Leonardo Dinelli. Congratulations to those 4. Congratulations to the Italians. If you want to follow up on any of the racing, just rewind it for yourself on sapsailing.com. Thanks so much for joining us over the last 4 days. We will be back to you next year with the semi-finals and the finals of the Sailing Champions League 2019. I'm Andy Rice, and I will continue to be so. And Mark Corky Rhodes, thank you very much for joining me over the last few days. We thoroughly enjoyed our time here, and we look forward to catching up with you sometime next year in 2019.
Liebe Sponsoren, vielen herzlichen Dank. Wir haben hier ein super Event, dürfen auf eure Unterstützung zählen. Wir hoffen noch in Zukunft. Merci vielmals.
Herzlichen Dank an alle Sponsoren für dieses einmalige Event hier, das Sailing Champions League Finale in St. Moritz.
Kiitos sponsoreille, että tätä tapahtumaa voi toteuttaa. On tosi mukavaa olla täällä.
Le Yacht Club de Monaco remercie énormément la Sailing Champions League et tous ses partenaires et sponsors pour cette super organisation ici à Saint-Moritz.
Grazie a tutti gli sponsor per aver reso possibile questa manifestazione.
Aan alle sponsoren, dank jullie wel om de finale van de Sailing Champions League mogelijk te maken.
Tak til alle sponsorer i Sailing Champions League her på St. Moritz. Det har været fantastiske omgivelser at holde den finale i.
Merci à tous les sponsors pour l'organisation de la Sailing Champions League ici à Saint-Moritz.
Jag vill tacka alla sponsorer för ett fantastiskt arbete i samband med Sailing Champions League här i St. Moritz.
Спасибо спонсорам за Sailing Champions League.
Jeg vil takke for at vi får lov å være med her i St. Moritz og oppleve det her. Og takke alle sponsorene som gjør det mulig at vi får lov til å seile opp i fjellene.
Danke an alle Sponsoren. Segel-Bundesliga ist ein Wahnsinn und die Champions League sowieso. Und hoffentlich seid ihr nächstes Jahr wieder dabei und wir freuen uns.